Let's give it a go. And with that, we are live, I believe, on our very strained equipment. But here we are, Portal Mountain Development Meeting number, I don't even know. Let's iterate this, 89, I guess. So this is probably incorrect. Yeah, we've just been chilling here so far. Dustin was by, and let's see. If this is working. Should be able to hear ourselves, I suppose. Damn. Oh, desktop's off. I guess that wouldn't that wouldn't help, would it? All right, where's our share? Oh, yeah, there's some noise. Is it garbling though?
There's some noise.
Well, at least I have it recorded though.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that seemed to be okay. I guess it's fine. We're just hobbling along here, but should be hopefully get our things get our shit sorted one of these times soon. It's just been a breakdown, one thing after another, all at once, and these things take time. So we are live, and I didn't update. That. Meeting 89. So it would be the Axiological Conspiracy Part 8. I don't know
It's
if
a
we're...
pretty big conspiracy.
Yeah, conspiracy is getting way too big right now.
But it's the conspiracy, so I mean...
It does keep going. Technically, we can't get outside of that in our discussion.
Exactly. So we might start to have a different focal point, but it's still the axiological conspiracy.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
You know what the AI did that will make me really happy and warm on the inside?
What's that?
It's one of the things that it wrote involved the word tether.
Okay.
So it like, I'm not going to say understood, but it definitely formulated a cycle of like feedback positivity.
Right.
That keeps one glued to the structure.
Tethering is a good word.
Yeah, tethering. So everything involved in that is psychosis, neurosis, past and present anxiety, regret, the future being, not past and present, past and future, the future being a reformulation of the past. So there's like all of these different moving parts to this concept, and taken together, you use like the past to create the regrets, to create anxieties for the future. Blah 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 blah. That's like the neurosis. You gotta climb the stack. That's the solution. The psychosis is believing that that's the only thing there is.
Your reality.
Yeah. So like all of that tied together gives us like what the tether looks like. It's a very it sounds like a small string, but it's actually a very loaded concept that takes all of that into consideration.
I like what
and
Dustin...
you need the ego stack to understand it in the first place. That's what you're tethered to.
Yeah. Yeah. It tethered through that interpretation.
And then the left and right discussion is like the content of how it's reinforced. So What structures are they
I was going to say,
reaffirming that structure?
I like how Dustin earlier today pointed out how people who are like, let's take this tendency for there to be two major opposing sides that people vaguely funnel into either one or the other, and somehow manage to get them on. Everyone manages to know whether they're generally on one side or another, right? Mm-hmm. All of that, whatever it's taken to get up to that point, this all-pervasive ideology and accepted it. That's not an easy thing to change. Like, this is the affect jungle. These are all the bad feelings you've ever felt are being projected onto the other side. All the good feelings are projected to yours, kind of thing. And it's like, this is where the good stuff is, that's the bad. And it literally feels like that when you look at anything around you. You feel it.
Do you remember how
it's not a choice, it's painful.
When we broke down the brain chart, when we did that, we saw that the more conscious elements, where you get your memetics, your running program, where you get your abstractions,
so the upper
concrete objects,
the upper half, if you will, of the chart,
very automated. So all of the choices preceded that preceded are in this quote unquote subconscious sort of build
right.
up.
You were talking about the lower as being more automated?
No.
Because you said the upper.
The upper is the more automated, and it's autopiloted. The bottom is where the choices get made, but you don't get direct control over. It gets the controls come from the automated element at the top.
Yeah.
So while we are talking, I think we did not make a very clear note of the fact that that narrative is not something you can willy-nilly transform into another narrative.
Like, just like belief through the magic of belief or something.
Yeah,
you can change.
We're painting it as something that is the most malleable element here, which it is in a sense, but it doesn't. You don't get to like change it with just like thoughts and prayers and all that kind of bullshit.
Yeah,
that's not what we're talking about.
As it sounds cold, but the term come to mind is reprogramming.
Yeah,
we have to reprogram ourselves in a way. And this is like when you say, "Oh, I know that I did something wrong, but I'm practicing and trying to be more mindful every time to not do that again." Right. This isn't a choice that like maybe you'll do it again, right? But when you become mindful of why you're changing, then those subconscious parts can be reshifted.
Exactly, but you don't get to choose how you feel the next moment.
And in the moment.
Or what you think of the next moment, or any of those things. That's simply going to come up.
You may have, it seems like, an ability to stop, to cut off these automation thoughts. Right? Like, of course, every time, whatever caused you to do this to somebody, it's going to swell up in you every time. But you have the choice, once it's arrived to you that this is the good thing to do, is to hurt them or whatever, that, wait, no, it's actually, I feel like that, but I'm not, I shouldn't actually do that.
Like, if your narrative contains the fork in the road, then you can do that. But if the model that shapes your narrative does not contain a fork in that road,
then you're just
you're just going to go forward.
You are that, yeah.
That's the basic idea, yeah.
Right.
And so, to get that fork in the road, you inject another narrative into the narrative, which results in artifacts that feed you back into your narrative. And that artifact can potentially, if combined with the correct artifact combination in totality, feed into a narrative that does contain into a fork in that road. But that's, again, not for granted, not to be taken for granted.
And generally you're talking about taking up the model.
Yeah. Which literally only says, look at the fork in the road.
Because the mind gives us a snap worldview and even action of judgment of where we should go and do and what feels good to do, and we just do it. But if we model, if part of our reality that was used to create that assumption of narrative, includes a model of ourself as building something that builds this narrative, then it becomes an outsider view, sort of a meta view, an observer view of the process itself, which allows for that choice to be injected, I guess.
Visible,
Yeah.
probable. It
Be-
increases its probability of appearing.
On top of I am this and I'm supposed to do this and this feels right, you're also I am a being who creates narratives like this.
Yeah.
Of what I'm experiencing right now.
And therefore, that choice of right and wrong is being created by me at that time. And does it apply in both contexts, like the context that I'm in and the context of me thinking of that context? Like, those are the things that you need to put together at the end. Like, that's how you, like, when I'm talking about, like, bridging the isomorphism between meta-narrative and narrative, I'm talking about, like, bridging these kinds of different contexts together.
So you said, does this make sense in terms of the narrative that I just felt, or also the fact that the narrative that I am a being that generates this stuff, which opens you up to a whole other universe, sort of a different reality,
different cause and effects.
So it allows you to go there potentially.
Sorry,
I
know I'm a little spazzy.
Well, no need. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. I'm just barely behind you enough, but I still have to drink my beer. And then get my own.
Like, what have I gotten myself into?
It's just like arrest, of course, development. But that's the dog whistle's development, because development can be genetic or this or that or not your fault or whatever. It's very vague, but it's personal. It's cutting personal. Your development. How is the fetus developing?
The other word I used to use is maturity.
Right.
So how does that differ?
I think just under arrest.
Somebody walking on the roof.
No, it's always bullshit. There's probably, I don't know, that did sound like bags up there or something, but no, it's always.
Those are steps.
There are, I doubt it. Flapping, things flap. There's often birds' nests.
Oh,
There, it
that
doesn't.
would make
I'm
sense.
not sure if it sounds like that, but they do.
Animals is the only thing I could think of that makes sense here.
They do that. Cool. All right, we back? We back.
Back again.
Mhm. Yep. So ability to add into our reality, into our affect jungle, our experience of things, the self model itself, the model as we call it,
Yeah.
which is becoming
just
aware of your inner
basically-
processes and all that.
But just basically, literally, what we're talking about, the structure being that model, this feedback loop that we're observing, the ego stack being that part of that model. Just seeing that those
Sure,
artifacts
yeah.
in play.
I was
Introducing the extra
I was thinking
structures.
more fundamentally and simplistic. But you're right. When the model includes what you're doing, as in like the market ego, it's much more compelling. It's very compelling. It's not just a fact of mechanics, rigid, not rigid, but ice cold mechanics. But
Well, you
also
can do a
a
comparison.
model of what we're doing to ourselves, how we're treating ourselves and each other.
A bunch of words to describe the very experience of the more abstract narrative that is being expressed by the system. So if you're on that track of systemic thinking, shit, I kind of lost my train of thought.
The ability to express what the system is doing to you.
Yeah, like including those mechanics, and then because like it's a model of the experience, you can test moment by moment if that fits. So it's not like it's a replacement. It's more like a supplemental artifact.
Right. It's like look
meta artifact.
It's like the instruction, like look around you until an object, a mental object, any mental object appears to you, whether it's the window or whatever. Hey, look, an object came into your awareness. Cool. Did it or didn't it? Try it. Did it or didn't it?
Right.
It's
sort of like
that
did
simple.
you have the experience or did
It's
you
that simple.
Was that experience painful?
It's
Was
not
that experience
profound.
pleasant?
It's not profound at all.
Oh yes, that's the charge. I remember.
Well, what's so special about this?
Well, if you were to put it together, it's not like the content that's special. It's just the way it's stitched and aggregated
Process
into
itself,
a single
if it's
model.
working correctly.
But like making the connective associations between, let's say, affect, going up the layer stack into more complexity, having an ontological matrix dream, agency and ego, and all of those kinds of interactions, just like having another narrative to supplement those experiences, and then checking to see whether those experiences are, like the language to show this experience matches it in this narrative, that narrative, the next narrative, all over and over and over and over again. So the idea is to like create something more universal that can be exchanged between two people to talk about your experiences being one way, concretely, my experiences being another, but at the same time, internally, there is like one abstract structure that we can both refer to.
I did just completely gap out for half of that, but the ability to communicate, a shared language for talking about the inner experiences that we have.
And that's literally how I described it earlier in SOTS, for example. Like, it's just why bother with like changing a whole bunch of terminology? Why not use already asserted words? Well, they don't mean fuck all in terms of like how we're stitching all that information together.
Yep. Well, yeah. It's a challenge if you're not established, as it were, as a system.
For
But
anybody,
again, to each other, it's established. So
for anybody who's curious as
and
to
too many in
like
Portal Mountain.
why we wouldn't just drop it after all these years, well, usually that question gets asked by people who are haphazardly participated and got a few reductive sound bites out of it. All the while they're glossing over the fact that this established friendships, like actual ones. It established a safe space for other people. It
A hug box, if you will.
Sure. But a genuine one where like nobody's actually like felt compelled to like hug the other person. More like that's just like what you do.
Right.
We've helped people with actual traumas. Not that that's what we intended to do, but like when you take all of these experiences put together, and then you have somebody who knows like the most most basic wrong thing about it, trying to yelp at you that it doesn't work, it's kind of hard to take that at face value. Like, there were legitimate experiences where,
sure.
where connections were made between people, not ideologies, not
I found
any
that
of
a
those
lot
things.
of like we over the years welcomed so many people who just came and gone, whatever, but like they were heard, they were seen, and I felt many of them were able to open up and share with us.
And like I'm not saying every story is a success. Paulo, for example, tragic. The guy is like falling.
He's not antagonistic towards our group,
He's
although
not
there has
he's not antagonistic
sometimes,
towards our group, but he's another ideologically driven individual,
right, which is understandable.
and in his ideology,
it's like red pill stuff, isn't it?
yeah, his ideology is not allowing him to see that you do not place yourself into the life of another person to dictate what's right and wrong. Like, he has no concept of staying the fuck out.
Well, this is the idea of like
To him, that's helping.
like judging something as degenerate.
Yes.
For example.
Yes,
right? Like,
he's definitely on top of those dogmas.
And then it's like, well, but like, who isn't degenerate or wasn't at some point? Should we all feel shame? And like, should this be a shame issue?
The word itself suggests something that isn't quite right, though. There is no like a degenerate form of humanity. That's a concept that is very abstract, and it's by nature.
It's a dog whistle because you must have a fascist view of like a perfect ideal.
Right, stratums.
The Ubermensch and all this.
You have to have stratums of like worth.
Right. To make that type of judgment on somebody.
To begin with, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's not like something that. So we use the word, but we're not. But only to point it out why it's a dog whistle to begin with.
Right.
Rather than to utilize said dog whistle to.
Well, this is a big problem, isn't it?
Don't even have any contact with, to be honest.
We need maybe better protocols for when people use such words, whether it's like everyone thinks they're good and innocent and all that, and has a point.
So it's interesting because, like, if you remember, there was discontent recently about a certain word we used.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of flies into the same box, I think. Like, I'm not particularly even comfortable in using.
I think we're okay to
just
address that. We're almost going to last.
I can talk about the word, but to utilize that word on somebody, I get the sentiment at the very least of like, that you don't call people that.
I think this is a success, and we've found arrested as even a better term.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Pardon.
I think stunting is another aspect that we can utilize.
Stunting is a neutral.
Yeah,
think.
but I think the arrest part gives more of an external force
Right.
sentiment.
Yes, absolutely.
You are being stopped by the extrinsic force of the system rather than
Hmm.
you
Right.
yourself
And
arresting your
the R
development.
word, as it were, was never thought of as anything but the fault of the individual and their DNA or whatever, like
Yeah,
in common usage, right? So
right. It was
good.
intended as a verb, as again an extrinsic force doing the slowing down of your development, or in this case, stopping. So to me, it's I get
I
it.
think we just need better
It's also
protocols
like
for how to address when people do these types of mistakes. We need better protocols, right? It's not.
sure,
It's and I'm glad for people who will stand up and try to set boundaries for health. What is healthy society, right? To stand out, stand up, make a point,
yeah.
right? Draw a line. It's good.
As long as we all understand that these lines are sand drawn and they are meant for specific communi- they're there to communicate messages more clearly.
Hmm.
They're
Not
they're
something to
there
be latched onto, like, oh, this is now the punishment because this has happened,
like there's something to be said for respecting the other person's need for you know
right?
not
Communication is difficult.
not hearing it a certain way or whatnot.
But sometimes there is a need for very deep communication and cutting communication, and it kind of gives you a point. And if like you said, if we are understanding of this safety of the space, quote unquote,
Yeah,
nobody's actually going to be
going out of their
thrown
way.
out, right? As long as this is a process of becoming more and more coherent,
Yeah.
and everyone's participating along the way, then it's good. But oftentimes, uh, somebody reacts too hard or whatever, this or that gets blown up, and it just didn't have to blow up. I feel like it happens a lot. And when we're talking about like the left wing, right wing spaces and
So the volatile
um,
stuff you can get really
the
blind.
dog whistling,
You
I
can
would say that's stepping it up a notch.
look. These conversations are basically parking your vehicle on the train tracks. That's what they are. You don't know when you're. Well, you should technically be able to realize when that train is
I
bearing
like this
down on you.
metaphor.
But some people are like
What do you mean the
not.
conversation itself, though?
So it's like you plant yourself on the train tracks and you're trying to like watch out for the train, but if you get too bogged down in whatever
And
mess you're in,
who is
that
this?
train's just gonna hit you
Who
from
is
the
this?
side without
Are we
like
talking about the one who, let's say, said an offensive word, or the one who is rejecting that with a
uh, the
boundary,
the one who's pushing the boundary.
who's trying to set up a boundary
No, pushing. There's a bound.
against it?
There's a boundary set, and you're pushing through. So the more you push through, the metaphor being like the pushing through part is like it's covering your senses up into like
Hmm.
one direction, and you don't see the train coming.
Well, like in this case, um, just imagine people being hurt by hearing the word used in a derogatory or negative sense while they're forced to identify it by society, to identify as that. It's like an automatic hurt,
Mm.
right? So don't use the word, okay? Uh,
So it's weird to me because also like the word like Jew, it has from one cycle, from the like one perspective, it's like
are you saying in
it's a
context?
slur. No, being called a Jew is a slur in some contexts. Yes,
Isn't
sorry.
that self-identifying
Well,
as
you were talking about like how society is forcing the identity on somebody. Like,
right?
hello, right? Like, I come from Israel, who only recognizes citizenship if you are
Right.
called
I'm
Jew.
reminded of the let's say N word.
It's even more. So
It's not the same, but
it's
there's
not the
some
same. It's not
weird
the same. It
things
has similar
like double
similarities,
standards and all that.
but the N word is not as formal as the Jew.
Right.
Like Jew as a label is a formality even, and it exists within the grander aspects of the system that are not used, where it's not used as a slur at all.
Right.
So there's like this whole
Mm-hmm.
spectrum of like, how the fuck do I feel
How
about
do
being
you
called a Jew?
how do you even separate whether it was a good thing or a bad thing? Look, you have to look at the person and divide them up into.
So are we talking about my quote unquote degeneracy in terms of the social state? Are we talking about the history
Like
of
a
the Jewish
right-wing thing?
people? Are we
Yeah.
talking about like who wrote the Bible? Are we talking about this? What the fuck are we talking? The religion?
Right.
There's so many different aspects. Like I don't even know what to make of that word. It is a slur, and it isn't. So there's like I'm
Well,
personally conflicted over how words used in many different ways because of this.
my approach. I don't know. This is something like I'm not too into it, but I would say Jewish if ever. I don't say Jew. I don't know if that makes any difference, but referring to
As a Jew hearing the word Jewish or Jew,
probably the
I
same
don't
thing.
give a fuck.
But
It's the
I
same
mean,
thing.
in
Yes,
context of like
I
the
will say
right
this.
wing would never say Jewish. You know
I
what I
will say
mean?
this. I
Like
will say this.
Jewish isn't as
The
much of a
people
dog
that
whistle,
use the word Jewish feel less threatening.
right? That's what I mean. The Jew would be a dog whistle as a word.
But it doesn't help that that word
More
is
of
used regularly
in normal
in normal context as
context,
well.
yeah, right.
Like
Yeah.
you open the Bible, it says the Jews.
Right. So then, in this case, with our discussion, if I can feedback and reflect a bit, usage of the term Jew sounds like
dog whistle.
very dog whistle and just like flippant and all that, just quick and like haha. But Jewish, if you're adding the ish, it's because of it's like a respect kind of thing.
Slightly Jew.
Yeah, well,
I'm not Jew. I'm Jewish.
Druish, Druidish. You're Druish. We'll take a short break. Be right back.
What's up, my Jew? Can you guess where I'm leading? What I'm leading into?
Did I get a J pass?
Do you understand what this is leading into? I just had this like thought.
You're
right?
gonna give me a pass. I can say Jew. Cool.
It's what's interesting right now to me.
Should we
is
go
that-
back?
Yes.
Okay. Wait. Sorry. Yep.
So
we're back.
all of this is just like leads up to an interesting thought I just had.
Okay. I'm interested.
A group owning a word. This is like what this is amounting to. Like you have
Sure.
a similar situation that you probably are
It does seem weird on its face.
can understand what I'm referring to, but this isn't like another example of that.
It isn't. Is this by owning a word? Is this how one can deal with a dog whistle? I guess.
Yeah.
The natural progression of a dog whistle is to become owned
To make it
by whoever it
to
was
make it a
against.
slur in the wild. I think that's the correct way to look at it. It becomes a slur in the wild, and because of that, it's a way to.
But then, why would even the owner want to say it? It's like an option, I guess.
Well, like I don't
But then,
hate the fact that I'm a Jew, right? Like it doesn't actually reflect negatively in my own perception of myself. So the word owned as that,
Sure. Yeah.
it's a sense of like, yeah, cool, whatever.
Interesting. I
Like
guess, yeah. Like
it isn't a negative identity to begin with. It doesn't come with a negative
in a way,
implication that it comes from the
it's
outside.
like it's been put out into the system as a dog whistle systemically. Therefore, you can't go back. It's already out in
Yeah.
the wild. It's a thing, and it can only be recaptured by
The environment has been changed.
by the victim, if you will, the target. Is the one who should have control over it to be able to talk or say freely about it, I guess. If it's a term of attack against that type of person, just let it die. Or if they want to keep using it, who cares? But nobody else. I guess this is the systemic um, dog whistle roadmap, I guess, for dog whistles, something like that.
It's kind of like that.
It seems like, I don't know.
I'm just trying to like put it together,
I'm just
some
riffing,
kind of
I don't know.
semblance of relatability.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have an avenue like I do with the whole Jewishness, but
No, I'm just a white dude. I got no victim.
aren't you a Slav?
Sure.
Well, Slavs are degenerate, if you didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Something to be proud of. Nice. Tell me more.
Again, we're picking on the word. We're not using the word. Just for clarity's sake, we're picking on this word. It's not sentiment
It's a
whatsoever.
lot of weird things to think about. One, somebody mentioned recently the idea that it's kind of like the white race doesn't exist, as same like the black race. You could almost say like everyone's from so many different places. Like these are like idealistic left-right type categorical things. Like who is actually the white?
That's pulling hairs
I don't
on
know.
a situation that doesn't understand what's being talked about.
That's it.
Nobody-
I
no-
thought it sounded pretty.
Nobody's like. Do you really think that when black people say stuff about being black, that they're talking about a monolithic entity? Or are they talking about specific systemic setups that reflect differently on skin color?
Yeah.
They're not talking about a monolithic entity. So
Right.
it's weird
Yeah,
to
I
assume
don't hear
a monolithic
talk of the
white
black
race.
I don't hear talk of the black race.
Exactly.
I
So
don't
there
hear
is no white race in that sense
like, what's
either.
going on now?
Because, like,
What is
honestly,
going on
that's
here?
not the conversation. That's a way to derail the conversation. There's no monoliths.
Right.
Nobody's talking about the monoliths.
Maybe it was just to point to that. I don't know.
Not anybody who is, worthy of listening
Maybe
to
it
is
is
going to be talking about monoliths.
so many layers of irony out there too, and all that. Who the F knows?
In fact, the whole monolithic thing, dog whistle.
Oh.
That's a dog whistle.
It's the fascist ideal.
Yeah, that you can group people into fucking categories that are like
Yeah,
rigid.
yeah. This is the thing. Like again, like as if there is the white race to be purely or something or whatever. Like the blue eyes, blonde hair. Right?
The word race is miscommunicating things. There are black people. There are white people. There are people in between. There are people who are Asian. There are people who are Southeast Asian. There are people who are
Right.
like, yeah, there are genetic strains of patterns and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But those are strings of bits of information that are like, do I do I handle the sun this way or that way? Do I handle sugar this way or that way? Do I handle fucking milk proteins this way or that way? Like what? These are the stories that we need to concentrate ourselves on.
Right. Yes, the milk over race.
Oh shit! Forgot about that. I heard recently that this has become another dog whistle.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the ability to actually digest milk
Right,
proteins.
but that's why though. I think it's got to be related.
It's related, but then they're forgetting the Mongols.
Like Europeans
are the ones that
tend to drink milk.
Yes, but this forgets the entire Mongol steppe who survived basically on drinking their horses' milks.
But they couldn't digest it.
They could. They're another.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The
Another
Mongols
lactase
tolerant.
Delayed. Apparently.
So it's not a. It's not a.
Apparently,
it's
everyone.
Definitely not a white
Everyone
trait.
has the ability to digest milk as a baby.
Yes, it gets lost.
It gets lost for some reason. That's kind of weird.
Because it's not.
Stop expressing. It's probably not used.
It's a weather-related condition. So food scarcity up north.
Yeah, I know that.
Had turned.
But I'm saying, like in
sub-Saharan, it's a new source of protein.
Sub-Sahara and all this.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
You don't need milk anymore. Milk is for babies.
Yeah, it's definitely not a thing. Well, we don't know now because with the modern supermarket that is, like Africa is not the backwards shit that you see on the commercials that ask for aid. It's a developed fucking region. Like it's got metropolises. It's going.
Okay, what was the point though about milk? I don't really get where you're going.
They probably have milk in their supermarkets.
And some people like it, and some people don't.
Exactly. So that's been renormalized, if you will.
Right.
But the dog whistle being, of course, white people being the milk drinkers, I guess. But even that is like not accurate.
But interestingly, this did become a dog whistle due to the propensity of the enzyme in certain cultures.
And the color of milk.
Oh, yes, even better. It's a perfection. They couldn't help themselves.
It's basically like using poetry,
right,
and combining it with
all you have to
diarrhea.
Do is join a chat and say that you like milk.
It's like combining poetry and diarrhea together.
You'll get
It's smelly. It's shitty, very shitty. It's not. Diarrhea is not quite, like the full processed product. It's the body expelling whatever the fucking garbage is as fast as possible.
I got gapped out on where did we get to? How did it become shit? We were talking about milk and then shit.
So
milk becomes shit. It's digested.
The narrative is diarrhea. Like, if you were to compare it to something physical, it has the markers of, expelling the garbage way faster than it has to be at the expense of the body's health by removing too much water at the same time.
This is all just something bigger, though. This should
I just like painting pictures. This looks like diarrhea.
The diarrhea is bigger than this.
Right.
It's part of a larger bowel movement, if you will.
Yeah, multiple assholes involved. There are multiple assholes involved,
Yes.
which just builds the metaphor. I love that it fits.
The asshole stack.
Just a bigger toilet.
Shit piles uphill.
I guess you won't see as much shit if you're at the top because it all comes to a point.
Correct. The mythical top. Yes, one day you will be. Just try harder.
It's the charlatanism of potential progress. When you take potential and you charlatan, give it the charlatan treatment, you get the myth of progress, basically.
Oh yeah, Eon's on. Nice, buddy. I forgot to get YouTube chat working too. But you're right. Our video is, it's not off. It's just
Paused.
in limbo.
We're indulging at the moment.
Mhm.
In the
And
smoke.
things that are perfectly normal and legal here, but maybe other places,
In the smokery.
people may be sensitive. And I wanted to get the chat going.
So maybe if we want to get this more focused
Oh,
a little bit.
Caitlin Nash. Haven't seen you in a long time. Degenerate is strong. Hey, sorry, Caitlin, we missed you. I guess you guys just jumped on probably like 20 minutes ago or something. Hello, Eon, as well. Welcome to everyone. I was just going to add the YouTube chat here, and you've all surprised us.
Yeah, we keep forgetting that we're interesting to some people. It's not a thing that is normal in our lives.
But very welcome to have friends.
Was there questions? Was there a commentary?
I don't think so. Just that degenerate is a very harsh word. We'll pull up the chat here.
Oh, absolutely. So, again, for clarity, the word, we're discussing the word and the fact that it's in the dog whistle category of things. So, we're not like using the term to refer to anyone. We're talking about its usage of being referred to people being a specific method of communication.
Should we let's put the link to the lobby. Caitlin was wondering. We cool? I think we're cool.
Yeah.
You can just throw a link,
It
links on YouTube and all that.
It is a harsh word, and I think we need to understand that there is going to be points where we won't say the word. There's going to be points where we will say the word. It depends on what the word is. And based on the fact that we're describing what dog whistles are, I'm going to try to like follow up on, the very same protocols that we're setting ourselves up for. So some words will be spoken because they are not as harmful, I guess. Like they're not perceived to be
Not
that
perceived.
harmful.
Yeah.
And so they can be spoken about without like dancing around the actual subject.
And sometimes you just don't know that they are perceived as harmful.
So I will say Jew, but we won't say N word, and we're going to refrain from going for the R word and things like that. But maybe we can talk about the word degenerate from the perspective of why it's dog whistle and why it's not an acceptable prospect.
Right. For one, because it feels like it's a personal attack of shame to even say the word. What does that even mean? Well, it's this person is a degenerate. That's how it's used. So therefore, it's practically useless in that sense. And a dog whistle, as well as like the fascist tendency for idealism of the perfection of
Yeah,
the perfect
that's
image.
actually what's
Who
more
is
interesting
who
there.
is the above, like the perfect
The
image?
implication of this word. That's what's actually more
Right. The
interesting
degenerate is
about it.
opposite of the Ubermonk or whatever.
And that's a discussion that they are having that we're trying to break down into its components so that we can say, no, that's not the way it fucking works, if you will. So, in a
Right.
way, it's kind of like an attempt, perhaps a very immature and naive attempt, at taking the power out of that word, if you will.
What is degenerate?
Yeah, like just
We
to
don't use it.
remove it.
We haven't used it though,
No, we don't
but to
use it.
talk about it, right?
We,
Sure.
we talk about
Yeah,
it.
it makes it powerless when you realize it's just a shaming operation against those who are not the ideal perfection of human.
In
Right.
some narrative.
According to this or that ideal.
Right.
This is the perfect human. That's the perfect family. This whatever.
Which, underneath it all, is just another mechanism to reinforce the appearance of the ego stack. None of it is concerned with the content. It doesn't care that this is the reality, that this is the morality, that this is the truth, that this is the falsehood. All it cares for, that this narrative cares for, is to retaining the stacking itself. It doesn't give a shit about who occupies
so
which layer of
you're
the
saying
It's just
functionally you're saying functionally egos are being sorted. In the moment, people are shaming and this and that and putting and seeing themselves as above or below, and it's working.
It's their
according to its own ways.
So it's a feedback loop to retain the status quo. You start off with the ego stack and you end with the ego stack. It doesn't matter what the contents of the arguments were. It doesn't matter which system, which political system you adopted. It doesn't matter which faction you're in. The fact of the ego stack remains, and that's all that it's for.
Yeah.
There's zero other concern.
Even if it has the most holiest of ideals behind it, like, well, actually the workers should be above the elite or the owners or whatever, or like the workers should
And now
own
you still have a
and
stack. Right? You didn't move
That's
away.
the point,
You didn't move away from stacking. And the stack never gets
There's
criticized.
always an othering classification of this class and that. Always. And what it transforms into. It's the same thing is happening though. Fundamentally the same.
And again, this isn't about the content. Like the content in the argument, yes, there's better arguments and worse arguments. Nobody's denying that. But the fact that none of the arguments challenge the actual structure of having to have those arguments.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem that I have. That's the problem we have.
That's where we're at.
Why aren't we talking about root cause?
And this is how we can segue into the subject of tether, which I'm actually much more interested in getting into right now.
Sure. In what context? What are we linking this to?
Do you remember how I described
tether? We wrote. We were doing GPT stuff this week.
Do you remember how I made an allusion to this subject earlier, where it seems like this thin rope that's tethering things, but actually we're talking about psychosis, neurosis, past, future. The future being
almost
reframed by the past.
It's like almost the whole buildup since you were a child. The whole buildup of all your experiences have been framed in a way that through by affect shove you into this way or that way. So if you've been shoved in, radicalized left, radicalized right, your whole identity is a giant stack of feelings that will be an extreme pain if ever challenged in any way. And that's your starting point.
And to point to something even more sad here is that the whole left-right thing on this level is just an arbitrary distinction of opposameness. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about left or right. We're only talking about being segmented into ego stacking.
Right, and that's the sameness.
So it's a theater.
Forget the opposite.
So it's a theater.
Don't get offended by the supposition that they're opposite. That's the content of what we're talking about. with the same oppositeness. Fine. The sameness of it is the ego stacking.
Right.
So if we can lead the conversation that way, then we can not get offended about saying, "Oh, this is just the same as that. I'm just as bad as Nazis now," or whatever, like whining stuff.
It's sidestepping the entire prospect of the conversation of punching a Nazi is as bad as being a Nazi. First of all,
As if that's the argument being made.
that is a contextless situation.
Right.
What is the context of being the Nazi being punched? And what is the context of me being a Nazi? Are they just loudmouths? Or are they enacting systemic changes? Are you being a fucking loudmouth? Or are you putting down a systemic change? Like, none of that is given.
Or you're right, analyze.
So
you
are
need
we just angry or are we just doing something?
If you don't have a model for this analysis, it doesn't become an option for you in the moment that it happens. That's how the subconscious has to be trained.
Like, what is the value of punching somebody on the street
By installing a model.
whose main crime is having a megaphone or something?
And to say, if he was a Nazi, he should punch him. And that doesn't, you can look at, a million cases throughout the world of people punching someone. As long as he was the Nazi, whatever, fine.
All you're saying is that if we upload this abstract idea into our matrix of thought, then we can excuse this activity, that activity, the other activity.
This becomes an automatic.
I'm sorry.
Automatic response.
But then, I'm sorry. Who does that?
Robots?
No. Who pushes up a bunch of ideals into the framework of abstraction and then uses that as an excuse to hurt people? Who does that? What do we call them? The authoritarian?
We call them ego stackers.
Nazis.
Ego stackers.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Ego stackers. Filthy ego stackers.
No, look. Who pushes an ideological framework into the abstract and then uses that as an excuse to push people into a hierarchy?
Right.
That's Nazism 101.
Yes. This is the thing you would hope that people could follow along and visualize. But again, a model is required. If the model isn't there in the moment, that fork in the road doesn't exist. And with that, we shall be right back.
So you know how ego stacking, you still have ego appearing at each level of the stack, so it's not differentiatable. And the only thing you see in the diagram is the system on the side giving reward and punishment ledgers to each level of the stack. So I think I need to complete the picture in your mind for this a little bit. If you think of each ledger of reward and punishment being slightly tailored for the layer in the stack, this is where you get your
automation layers of this is what.
So what you see,
egos make up the stack.
What makes a difference in that not everything is just ego is agency. So if you think about it, you have different agents occupying each layers of the ego stack. They're all ego, all of which, right? But they're different agents. And so the ontological matrix is like displays that stratification of like elites and poor and everything in between. Right? That's the idea there. So yes, ego, but agency is not the same as ego. It's built from ego.
Yes.
With sound bites.
Yes. Ego is this simple thing. Agency is the matrix.
Like the whole complicated picture.
What you do with this type of arrangement.
So this just gives you the idea that there's layering.
But you need to know how actually these egos are stacked, and that's like, do you need protocol material between them and
so the other thing that this diagram will show you is that you can just do this and that's fine, right? Or you can just like remove this line and it's fine. That's what this diagram is for. Nothing changes about ego. Nothing changes about the fall. Nothing changes about acceleration to the top. Nothing changes about any of that. Ledgers of reward and punishment remain intact, but you make that shift in there, reform, right? All of the agencies switch around, and people think change is happening.
Right. Yeah, and by agency you mean like a private farmer is suddenly like
a corporation or whatever, or this or that.
Or like,
or they have more
communist takeover.
Or they have a better, or they have a better social network underneath them to protect them, or this, or some other legislative changes happened, or this. The fucking scraps
as an ego,
scraps.
Though. We're talking about the
retaining the structure.
The what do you call it? It's a contract. It's
we're not on.
No, we ain't on a contract. So the social contract, if you will.
Yes.
You can have very many variants of a social contract that keeps somebody afloat through their ego via various agencies that they could occupy.
Think about it this way. Agency is what the paperwork is saying. So as you fill out your paperwork, the position of your agency within the system keeps rearranging itself. The mechanism of being positioned in the system is retained. So as your paperwork evolves, you might go up a layer, you might go down a layer, layers may dissipate, layers may
we're talking about arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. That's the metaphor I like
for reform
for this one. Yeah, just that the egos move around, or
agency is moving around. Egos, the same ego retains the same space, if you will. So the elite ego, the lower class ego, the middle class ego.
And these are things shared by people. You say there is an ego, not multiple. It is the middle class ego, this ego.
In this model, yeah. That's what we're using the word ego to kind of represent in there. The way the commodification is being passed around through the narrative.
And also fundamentally an ego as the general
product.
This general process of egoing.
Yeah.
Right, in the model.
And feeding back
as in self, you've got self-reference from which comes a self. And in quite self-same image is the ego, which incorporates the market, commodifies. It's a commodified self, right?
Yeah.
A reified for market transaction.
For market transactions, yeah. a reification for market transactions. Note in the balance sheet of value. This is $100.
Well, you can attach properties. It's kind of like your ID number, your name, all these things kind of are pieces of it.
Like a nice little tattoo on the wrist.
So it's a systemic idea of yourself that begins not out there, not in any description of what the system is doing, but what we do to ourselves. When we look at our bodies and be like, well, I have to go to work today. My body's fucked from working. I'm going to work.
My mental
Here
capacity
we
is
go.
fucked from
That's
working.
all that it is. It's a transaction. You're being paid to commodify and sell your time,
Your meat sack.
your labor, etc.
Your very own meat sack and your own artificial intelligence network.
Oh yeah, I forgot to put the video on too. Thanks, Eon, for mentioning. I don't know if y'all still around. Where did the YouTube chat go? Yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
But it's not over.
No, of course not.
So we have like an interesting like
Didn't work.
concept happening. See what I'm saying?
Yep, that helps.
And
Oh, it's
we do label the problem for the most part, but we also have an angle for what we would perhaps suggest as a way forward.
Okay, yeah.
And it's interesting because it actually ties into the way that I described the tether and basically like the excuse I have for why this will actually work. Now, the tether
Bonk.
is
Just
a
put that
metaphor,
there for a sec.
obviously, and you probably are picturing a kind of a thin rope tethering two things to each other so that they can't move away. Right?
Yeah, you know what? I love these kind of technical details because, again, this model, when you have a model of something, it allows your subconscious in the moment to give you that, and your narrative is like, I have a choice here.
A meta.
It presents up to you because you have the model too.
Yeah, it's a meta. It's a meta
Where,
conversation.
Like, a lot of books can, or like
Suggest
authors
something like that?
can try to walk you through something like that, but without the like technicals, I guess depending on what kind of person you are, but it's like you can just be initiated and thrown into like a spin or a spiral, and it's like by hearing, somebody who has seen deeper into themselves and been like, I want to share that with people.
I feel like a very similar sentiment, and here's how I want to word it. It's like when people talk about the past or the future or whatever, for example, they mention the word past, the future, but they don't exactly tell you like, well, here's how you think about the past. Here's how you think about the future. Here's how those two things are related. Here's how to combine the two concepts into a singular manifestation of an idea. And this is what I'm actually trying to do.
I don't like things being left wishy-washy, if you will.
Right, and this is
where
exactly
it's like
what I'm
not explicit kind of
same, and this is exactly what I'm trying to get away from. Like when I say past and future, I'm also saying anxiety and regret. I'm also saying past is future in a specific way, right? Like the whole idea of the future being
and this I think is
rearrangement of your past experiences, like because you can't project things you don't experience. So what are you going to like imagine? Like things you've never don't have a relationship to whatsoever? That's sort of the thinking going there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, there has to be some foundation of it, some experience. If you've never looked into yourself,
so that you're simple terms. Sorry, I know I'm cutting you off. I didn't mean to.
Mind
very simple
Feel
terms,
inspired.
whatever projection of the future that you may have is going to consist of components that you have experienced in your past. If you're going to imagine a street and a building and whatever,
Right.
it's going to be streets and buildings that you have experienced with. You might rearrange them, but it's going to be a projection of them. Because you're not going to be thinking about not streets.
Right.
You're not going to be thinking about not buildings. You know what I mean?
Now,
those things that you don't have connection to.
If you were an alien born on a completely different planet,
That would look
you would
different.
have a whole bunch of nothing you think right now would make sense over there.
Well, not nothing. Maybe shelter will make sense. Maybe sustenance will make sense. Those universal
Probably,
things.
yeah.
The process
That's right.
they're
I was
universal
just trying
to
to get
life.
into the mind of the of the other, I
So
guess.
buildings and roads and all of that stuff are still going to make sense to an alien creature if they're abstracted. Because okay,
You don't have to go far to find alien creatures. We are all very
alien from each other
in our experiences, right?
But-
You don't have to go far.
but our alien experiences are all constructed from universalities, all of them, because we are a medium to under which those experiences are happening. So
You
the
mean-
processing of those experiences are going to have universal aspects.
Oh my God! What?
Like, I don't know, pleasure, or I don't know, pain. Those are
We're-
going to be
we're-
things that are experienced no matter who you are.
We're all
Even if you're a sociopath, you will feel pain and you will feel pleasure.
we're all humans.
Yeah, I know it's tough. It's a tough cookie. It's a tough cookie.
Yeah, that's cool.
We share.
That's cool.
We share physical DNA with each other. What? What we do with that DNA is a different story,
hmm
and that's where the distinction is being drawn. I don't know why it's so fucking complicated.
Maybe you just put it into a piece of toilet paper and flush it down the toilet. That was from an earlier conversation. Sorry, just wanted to blindside you with it.
No, you didn't.
What we do with our DNA, and you're just like, yeah,
Yeah. No,
made
that didn't
perfect sense.
didn't blindside me whatsoever.
No, I saw that.
I
Yeah,
have been there.
you didn't actually look confused.
No, I've been there. It's an experience I've also shared. But
Yep.
but when I say universal experience, I'm not talking about like the abstracted ideals about the world outside. I'm talking about like
Kind of the opposite. The mechanisms that create abstractions of ideals outside.
that I feel this on my skin, that this is cold, that this is hot, that this is I like it, that I don't like it, that I don't care about it. All of those things.
That's even not as deep as what I just suggested then.
Exactly. It's literally that super. No, it's not superficial, but
The stove is hot. The fridge is cold.
Yeah, it's not. We're not talking about like ideals that are universal because they're not.
So you're saying I'm as bad as a Nazi because his fridge is cold?
If your fridge is cold,
My fridge is cold.
then you have an association with Nazism. I know.
We're gonna fight. We're fighting right now.
I know. It's such a hard concept to
We're
grasp.
fighting. Let's take this
Did you
outside.
know that your heart is beating?
We're taking this outside right now.
Did you know that your heart is beating and Nazis' hearts are beating?
You're dead to me. I'm the opposite of a Nazi. Okay.
That's why I'm saying those are lines drawn in sand and need to be recognized as such. Like, we need to know, where do we stop applying the actual ideology narrative and go with a model narrative instead?
Probably for relating to other people, but people represent this whole ego stack and the
It's a rhetorical question with an obvious answer, but yeah. If I'm going to put it this way, if you don't intuit this answer, you're dead to me. You know what I mean? Like, you're not, but yeah. You kind of like, maybe brush up on, I don't know, experience with fucking people.
helps.
Not screens.
It does help. Yeah, I feel like we've been through a lot of drama the last couple weeks.
And you can tell I've assumed some of it onto my own person.
Into passions, I guess.
I'm bothered by the fact that I've known you for an excess of 20 years, and I have the actual fucking authority to say, yeah, he means that, if I need to.
You could certainly say no, he doesn't. That's not his opinion. Because people. Anyways, the whole episode is like purity test after purity test. So he assumes this, he wants this, he likes this, he does that.
Not to mention that my rapport is also high enough for
no,
this.
He doesn't. No, he doesn't. That's not. What are you talking
about? My rapport
about?
should be high enough for it to like not take that effect anymore. Because
that's an insult on you, right?
Like, I mean, look, even Yusha's going like,
I
understand your answer. I'm cool. Out. I'm cool with it.
You didn't get banned.
No, do you remember Yush saying, "I understand his answer. I'm cool with it." That kind of style, and I'm like, okay, fine, finally. And then I again project like, fucking no, I know this person. That's not an option in that. There is no option in that direction.
Thanks, man, for standing up for me, and I'm sure many times in the past, but even recently, for sure.
I'm glad
there's been episodes, and I feel like it's kind of over. I hope.
I'm glad that Geiger does not have a medium.
Fleshing it out, and
no, he doesn't have a medium anymore. So you can
what medium?
You can just basically forget that he exists at this point. The reason I'm saying on Salts, nobody's taking his shit anymore. They're not listening to him. Noel came out and was like,
okay,
your fundamentals are the same.
I guess, just not getting sucked up into all this stuff.
The latest statement
I made. Zumi keeps posting. That's why they like Bird too. I think was for sliding the chat for just people who speak out their things and relate and have a joke and a laugh and that. Right?
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Not, in other words, not engaging in like some kind of bullshit.
Well,
ideological bullshit.
Do you remember the last thing I said was just like we don't actually have an argument.
Zumi,
as far as the fundamentals are, we're all
Zumi
on the
said
same
to Geiger, like, I appreciate that you have a thing to hold on to, kind of thing, and like the ideology, like I'm not into it, but that's your coping mechanism, basically. Zumi said to Geiger about his like communist drives, or what you'd call it, I don't know.
Obsessions.
I guess.
It's
right.
a neuro. It's
part
a
of
neuro.
Part of it's my problem too.
Neurosis.
I have trouble letting go.
That's your neurosis. I have my own neurosis. Everybody's got the neurosis part. I'm not talking about.
I can't just let shit slide with that kind of stuff. But
we're not above it. We all have our own.
Yeah, we got sucked in many times, and that's.
Remember, this is ego.
Growing processes.
Ego, punishment, and reward. You have ego agency involved in a certain stratum of that layer. You don't have the authority. You're like a. They're bottom
because I'm
feeder.
on the different class. I'm not the proletariat. I'm probably less than, because I don't understand the communist goals.
Criminal.
I'm a criminal, I guess.
That's the metaphor.
And in his ideal, the deck chairs on the Titanic shift, the rewards and punishments shifts, and people get different rewards and punishments. And I'm a criminal. Or whatever. Right? That's...
Criminal being like you're useless to that reward and punishment system. You just deserve the punishment. And your only reward is not getting punished.
Outsider.
You're not a productive contributor.
Right. And so
you're not feeding the stack its authorities.
My assertion there would be like, if his politics is just to suck up to China and like wish for communism, that's not. I don't know. That's not.
Well, you're doing the same thing that he's doing. Then you can't just say he's sucking up to China.
Right. So I'm classifying this. This was my impression. This is my impression of what he does as far as a political objective. This is my
Yeah. But like, notice this
assessment.
notice how oppositeness is working in your head.
Yeah.
Like you did the same thing, even though you're keenly aware that this is what's being done, and you can't even
Right.
help it almost. Like you can't help that assumption. Like all I did
But
is
you're right.
I held back.
In the political space, in the space of political arena, that he seemed to me to be taking that position up. That's what he projected, if you will. That's not. I don't
Right.
think that's all of who
And
he
the
is.
irony of the whole situation is that he's screaming that this is what you're projecting. You're screaming at him, fuck off. But
Right.
your mental model of him
Same
becomes.
thing. I could be
calcified
attacking
in the
him for
same
being
thing.
that. I
Yeah.
could be junkyard dog against him. Oh, you're a communist or whatever.
And
Just
what's
authoritarian jackboot. Start
and all of
licking
this is-
shit, and I could make this into a big fucking tornado of shit, and people get banned once again, and who cares, right? Like, boom, it's over.
the point isn't that it happened, but the point is that you could not stop it from happening in your own mind.
You're right. This is automation bubbles up. I also did have choices come up at the times when I was able to. I've found myself putting the duct tape and just for like a period of time being like, I can still say that. I can still say it. And being like, well, it's just going to trigger the thing. Just because you notice what they're doing, well, it's actually what the opposite side, if you will, does is notice things, and he will notice what I'm doing.
Another observation. Look at where the conversation is going. Specifically, nowhere. Labels are thrown. Labels are thrown. Labels are thrown.
Right.
Labels are thrown. Labels are thrown. There's no actual. There's just antagonism, but there's no.
Everyone just gets
there's no
shit.
communicating.
Everyone gets shit all over them. Shit everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody leaves out smelling like shit.
Right.
is the end result.
And we have sinned.
And I'm not saying that I know that you did not even have a choice in that decision making process.
Right.
Because it's not about you should know better because you know model. It's not like the shaming mechanism, whatever. This is the kind of stuff to observe with feedback on.
Right.
That despite all of this fucking modeling that we fucking be doing,
it's still happening.
We jump right into it.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not talking about you specifically, by the way. Just so we're clear. This same dynamic has happened in the reverse.
Right.
Easily enough.
Like, obviously, I perceive these things in the moment. Right. I'm relaying.
Right.
Relaying history.
But the autopilot narrative, the inability to force an artifact to make an effect.
If I'm to try and imagine Geiger's mind, what is his goal?
So you're seeing what I'm keep alluding to. You have to undermine your entire narratological process entirely by the model. It is only at that point where you break everything apart and you don't get sucked up into this narrative or the other narrative, because the only narrative is the model.
Yeah. No, that's the hope. That is the entire thing is to have this sort of alternative, if you will. And all that the alternative is a self-knowledge in addition to a knowledge of what's going on in the world. Both considered so that you have a fork in every impulse that's given to you by your subconscious. There's a fork in that road to go model and just dissolve it, or to be that narrative and exist it and express it.
And given observation of where we tend to end up, that is so fucking difficult.
You should,
the injection of that artifact to make that fork in the road is a great idea. But to get the fork in the road after injecting that artifact,
it's a long process. It's a long process of
That doesn't happen.
building up an entirely new system of affect, one that rewards in the peace of it all.
And I'm also sorry that it might be what I say that leads that way. And that is a triggering element. I apologize.
Just get on your knees. Get on your
for
knees.
being correct about something. Ah, fuck.
Just never teach anything unless you lay on the ground and beg for forgiveness first. With doing one of those. Oh man, okay. All right. We'll be back. How dare you?
Did you know that a Nazi skull houses a brain?
No. Is there milk? Is there milk in it?
Digested.
Yeah.
Pre-digested. Tether? Mechanics of the tether? It's a fascinating subject. It's a thin,
Oh, we got about an hour.
it's a thin string that is fatter than you think.
Tether. Well, this is the affect jungle, which I guess we're getting to, but
It's the mechanism of holding, right? It's like what's holding what?
Connect. Right.
Why the feedback loop keeps happening, kind of a thing. The mechanism of the feedback.
Yeah. Tether.
What do you recall of the tether?
Trying to recall other things. Tether. Yeah. And
Neurosis, psychosis.
ideological capture.
So, ideology is somewhat removed through layers.
Psychosis, neurosis.
Yeah, but that's more immediate.
That's what I meant. That should go through there, and that in brackets.
So with
it's
the
kind of like
ideology, if you remember, it's an ideological arc. That is like a
this is where I want to
a
get.
thunderbolt through the spectrum of stupidity.
And this is the left and right shit.
The left and right, remember, is fundamentally a theater that is asserting the ego stacking.
That's its purpose, right? Like the fact of it, almost.
Yeah.
It's
So
like deck chairs.
So left right is a smokescreen.
Deck chairs.
It's a one specific myth. So one of the myths of the system, if you will, left and right. Other myths would involve meritocracy.
Hold on, let's go back in.
Yeah.
With this idea of the tether, I feel like we've taken the axiological conspiracy into well, we can take it now through tether, but we've brought up like ideological capture, psychosis, neurosis, this whole left-right, the political ideology, political identity stuff. This is like kind of where it leads. This is what its immediate, like its final effect in our current society looks like.
How we can find the isomorphism with our personal narratives out there in the world right now. Yes.
Sure. The ego stacking is what's going on as a result of the axiological conspiracy. And it doesn't matter left or right, communist, fascist, whatever, you're still going to be ego stacking, and this is still firmly within the world of the conspiracy.
Nothing changes.
It's not different.
It is the
it's
status
not
quo.
different, and we can point to that because there are fundamentals which are still in use in both systems.
So the status quo that we would be referring to is ego stacking specifically.
Right. Ego stackers. We could,
that
if
is,
we wanted to try and
that is what really
group people and shame them, those dirty ego stackers.
Yeah. For example.
Just if we wanted to do that, we could.
If we were to ego stack.
Call me filthy too. But if we wanted to ego stack, we could do that.
Yeah.
Below us.
But the point is, why we're calling that the status quo and why we're calling the left and right theater is because the left and right, all the way to the extremes, end up reinforcing just the ego stack and continuing the ego stacking, and therefore that is the status quo. We
rearrange the deck chairs. Different people become the owners. The owner class becomes different. Boom.
So yeah, that's where the word theater is coming from. Nothing changes about the ego stack itself.
Right.
Just the
which perpetuates.
Just the theatrics as to how it's utilized.
Right. This machine-like.
Are we saying some theatrics are better than others? We're not saying that, but we're not saying some theatrics are not better than others either. So what we're not talking about is which theatrics we prefer. We're just saying.
How dare you?
We're just saying they're theatrics.
No, you're not affirming my theatrics. What's wrong with you?
Right. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Was that a dog whistle? You're actually one of them.
Well,
right,
I mean,
you? I
think in the right context it can be.
No, I wasn't.
No, I'm
sure
anything
could.
I'm sure there is some dog whistles to that effect. In fact, everything we say will have a dog whistle somewhere. That's because signaling is a thing.
It just means we have to be responsible for the words we use in order to use them in the best ways that we can possibly imagine, and to
genuine,
and to be able in conversation discuss our usage.
You're just talking about being genuine,
right?
Which has
its protocol.
Which has its own problem because people tend to read between the lines, even if there are no lines to read between.
Sometimes. It happens.
For me, it happens most times. I don't project between the lines messages, but I have to fight the feedback
Right, yeah,
of
yeah.
where they
We
occur.
share it in common.
It's very tedious and it's very boring.
Well, yeah, from our perspective, I guess most people wouldn't be able to relate too much. Maybe. Because, like, yeah, it's. um, just
Devin.
like to be up to speed on the latest memes. If you're not, like, sudden, it's a cut. I don't know.
So, Tyler,
Yeah.
what makes it the fat one?
Why is it big?
Why is it fat? Not as thin as you'd imagine. Past, future, regret, anxiety, neurosis, psychosis all feed into this cycle. As like self-similar things being described in different ways.
I think the affect probably reinforces because this is what creates the automation image, the narrative that is good for you. You automatically think to do the good thing because you're going to feel better after. This is what you've calculated based in your subconscious system.
So let's break it down.
This will feel good. You get the impulse. If you have a model, you have a choice to break it down. If you don't, you do the impulse.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, is break it down.
Mm-hmm.
The first point of breakdown, reformulating the future in terms of the past. So severing the clear-cut distinction between the two.
Right.
You have a situation where your future, the whole of it, is framed by all of the past. Because the past is what gives you the Lego pieces.
You're talking about
and the future is what
universals.
Of experience, yes. Like just your universal experience of future and past in general. Everything you are constructing to be your future consists of Lego pieces that you've picked up from your past. The staircase, the door, the window, the wall, the grass, the tree, the sky, the sun.
But there's an interesting mutational aspect to this. It's not just the mechanical, or you can connect these in like
it's
X number of ways. It's like, but you can do it in ways that don't even make any freaking sense, and then somehow they do make sense at a higher layer, right? That's, I think.
So this is where we get into the subject of hyperstition.
Maybe, but
right? Because
this also makes it less
if you imagine
mechanistic.
the rearranging of your past into this particular structure in your future, and you enact that, you've created a hyperstition. That's what transpired. Like, so your rearrangement of the past transpired into the future. It was in the past a hyperstition, became a reality, and from the moment it arrived.
Yeah. So hyperstition is a skill, I guess, to build an image or a model that
takes the past.
It's like a seed. It's like planting a seed in the universe. It's going to unfold in some way and do something.
Sure. It's another way of looking at it.
Yes, yeah.
So growth is a hyperstition as a observational fact.
Growth itself?
Like biological growth. So, like, let's break it down to like more mechanical body statements.
Sure.
Your puberty is built into you from your childhood, since the time you were born, but only takes effect at, like, say, age 10, 11, 13, 14,
right.
11, 12, 13,
It's 14. Like a hyperstitional model built into your body that's
like
going
it's already
to execute.
pre-programmed into the DNA, but it's just not arrived
If you read the DNA, it says, hey, this is going to happen. But you can also create that with narratives and stories.
Yeah.
Right.
And as soon as you create those narratives, it's exactly what's going to happen.
If they're isomorphic.
No, but the creation of the narrative itself drives the outcome.
But that's what I mean. If the
If
narrative
they're-
is isomorphic
Okay, yes,
with
you have the whole
with the environment.
conditional
the
elements.
seed is planted in the environment, the
Yeah.
seed must be isomorphic with it.
The seed, but the seed needs water. The seed needs good soil. The seed needs this, that.
That's
If
what I mean.
that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
there, it's not happening.
Right. True, yeah, that's another aspect. It can be isomorphic, but not just conditions not met. They could be met.
Right. It's a hypothetical too.
Mhm.
Hyper
Right.
about that.
Interesting.
But the DNA of the hyperstition being in place for the right environment
So it's a
gives
fact.
no room for it to not happen.
It's a fact that our future is what we think of our future when we imagine it is based on the past, what has happened in the past.
Right. So that's one line blurred from being two discrete contexts into a singular context. That's how we get into the tether.
Right.
So
As
now,
if they're even different, the future and the past.
so now, we can think of all of narrative in that sort of distribution of past, future, and sameness at the same time. Then you inject regret for the past and anxiety for the future. So it's like, I didn't do this, I did this wrong, I missed out on this. Versus, I don't want to do this wrong, I don't want to miss out on that. See, it's the same. It's the same picture. It's just framed differently into opposing directions.
Right.
So you build that into the narrative.
And the narrative can compose of future and past as a blob.
So now you're seeing a medium for a reward and punishment. I didn't do enough. I succeeded there. I didn't succeed there. Blah blah blah. I will do this. I will not do this. I will be rewarded for this. I will be punished for that. Again, there's a blending of the same ideas.
Okay. You're talking about extending the mechanism of the machinery of the system through reward, punishment, through affect, into the future of the individual, like in their narratives that they hold. Like, I will do this so I don't get punished. I won't do that, this, etc.
Which all comes back as pleasures, pains, and whatever.
So for the idea that
keep shaping
point
the
is
next point of
formulations of the narratives that themselves causally within the system are what we can observe.
Right, because having created those narratives, now you have artifacts. This feedback into the meme plants.
And dog whistles.
Same thing. The point is that these alienated ideas are feeding into the non-alienated mechanisms that perceive you as yourself. So these alienations are the bedrock on which you are selling yourself through ego. So you don't have a system in which you can belong, but have a system.
I get completely.
Basically, the feedback is that the system you're getting back to yourself is not the system you can belong to, but it is a system in which you can sell your sense of self-narrative into it for its successes, for
You're talking
its
about the market.
punishments.
Yeah.
And that is the ego. So it's the same mechanism for everyone. It's the selling of self for this reward for that punishment. That's why there's no different egos. There's just ego.
It's basically contract law. The market. Seems like agreements between egos. You do this, I do that, whatever. I give the money, you give the thing.
And if you're born into this narrative, you have very little recourse as to like how not to do that.
Right.
Where everything says just do that.
Yeah, and that's a weird blind spot bias for everybody. That we were all disadvantaged in the same way that the capitalist market relation, the way we relate to each other as, well, you better get a job, get money, and transact to be able to live, to deserve it, is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. There's nowhere it's not. So we are all in this boat, right?
The same thing. My story of myself is sold on the market for a price. That's all I'm referring to as ego, right? So that's why it's not.
We should go on a
That's why you don't
missionary.
have your ego. You don't, because you're just selling yourself on the market for a price. I don't have a different ego. It's just me selling myself on the
Doing the
market for a
same
price.
thing. If it's not differentiated, how is it unique?
Exactly. So agency is the differentiator because there's different circumstances that are provided by the entire environment.
We should create a missionary. What do you call it? Mission to Sentinel Island. You know that like those natives that kill everyone, and we should teach them the model.
I think they're going to teach you the model before you teach them the model. To answer any questions of the paradox of intolerance or the paradox of tolerance, that visitation to that island should paint the entire picture. It's like, yeah, you're going to see exactly how
Yeah.
tolerant that is of that
Right.
kind of invasion.
Mhm.
The idea that there is no immune system, the idea that there is
Yeah,
like
right.
a complete like
Or that some kind of liberal idea can just
being like
found like shunt right to the
a
bottom of
fucking
the
walking
stack.
carpet on, like you know what I mean, like being a rug to be walked on. Like I don't understand why that's the only alternative to not agreeing with the more stricter painting
Immunity
of the world.
is a stabilizing force. It makes things stable, not vulnerable.
Which is exactly what. So focus has been always like the primary go-to, but you notice it's never a complete picture of the immunity guild. Because the immunity guild's picture is completed by restoration and preservation, not in that order.
Right.
And those are far more abstract, far more like. But you'll notice there is no further progression of the guild dynamics whatsoever until that is handled. So what you're saying about the immunity being the balance setter is very similar to what I'm trying to get at with you set up the environment for preservation so that shit does not happen to
And restoration. These
to
are more abstract spaces, domains, abstract domains.
so while all of this revolves around focus, right? Focus is like the underdog of the entire concept. It just has to be intrinsic. What are you preserving? Focus. What are you restoring? Focus. What gets spilled into the environment? Focus. What gets spilled into technology? Focus. What gets spilled into data? Focus. 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 Focus.
Right, yeah,
Focus.
this is, I haven't, like, when you put it together like that, I know that I haven't gone through and this would be a meditation. Boom, 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 up the stack, up the stack. I haven't done it like that.
It's taking focus and expanding and expanding and expanding. Then the first 2 points of that expansion are its own preservation, as in not just do it, but continue to do things that enable it.
Allow it to keep happening.
Right. And
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that
yeah,
fucks
yeah,
up,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and if there's a fuck up in there somewhere,
And why
restore it.
This is so fundamental to holonic modeling and stacking, holonic stacking, because every time you go up a layer, you have a new language to speak and things to do, but it always has to create a system that takes care of the things that happened before.
Right.
Every time you go up a layer, the new language is utilized to look downward and to preserve and to restore what is below.
And so the point I'm trying to make is that you don't even get through the immunity guild proper, if you will, without the actual step back of the past and future. So not only is it about the moment being in focus, right? Preservation is about keeping the future lined up for focus, And restoration is about taking the past and reformulating it for focus. So it's like taking that moment and expanding it into past and
I feel
present
like this could
and
be a
future.
separate app. This is like our health app or something.
Well,
quote unquote mindfulness app.
Well, all of this also promotes the idea of record of
What do you think?
accountability.
Could there be a different app aside from Dashboard?
No, there's that.
That would take care of that. Okay, so a module within Dashboard
to keep track of that specific set of data.
Well, there's education about the stack and how things need to be preserved. And,
which
and
is just informational.
Right. Part of education.
So education is a weird one, in which you don't get the full-blown picture of education until you've gone all the way up through the stack, all to
right.
To
this is a natural stack, or the natural stack, right?
So,
natural guilds.
So it's there to like catch you up onto the next layer only, right? It doesn't need to expand until that layer expands, and it needs to feed the information.
In a way, what's before is education too, but
the very fact of focus is already giving you the first glimpse into education and immunity guilds in tandem.
How to dynamically navigate an environment.
So even in its very first inception, it's already what do you call it?
Should be self-similar.
Dependently originated, if you will. Because even the environment is going to get affected whether you explicitly label it or not. The room, the house, and so forth. Because when you do focus, you're doing it in your room, you're doing it in the house, you're doing it in the so forth. So it's not like you can isolate those subjects from each other other than the abstract. You can say to yourself, I'm just focusing on my body. Sure. You can say to yourself, I'm just focusing on my body and my room. But
immediately the concrete comes up, the context. Well, that unfolds into, I'm taking care of this, this, and that.
It's just that the model for that part is blurry. The model for this part is more clear. But that blurriness can be taken care of if you expand the model back out into there. So it becomes again sustenance, nutrition. Hygiene, nutrition. But hygiene and nutrition take on more abstract notions like this mechanism works, this mechanism doesn't.
This is a different book. What's this one called?
Guild Dynamics.
Yeah.
That's what that's called. We're kind
Interesting, and we haven't gone into it in a while, and it's great to come back to it and like.
We're coming back to it from the perspective of perception mechanics.
New perspectives.
Because that's what we've been hovering in perception mechanics. So yeah, like the solution is to like a twofold. First of all, the understanding of the model and the enactment of the model through focus. But then you have this area where if you don't have your restoration and preservation figured out, you're not actually going beyond the immunity guild. So everything that happens to environment, technology, and whatever is going to be tainted by that.
Right.
But conversely, if those two things are taken into the fold, the expansion outwards is taking that consideration into the fold.
Right.
It's not a profound idea.
No.
It's just that's that mechanics of it.
It's a normal sort of process when you consider polonic modeling.
Yeah, and right. The obvious...
You see these things where you develop a fundamental, and then it appears in every subsequent thing somehow.
And that's why I made the distinction between pure immunity, I pretended as for your body, and then environment, which is actually not a difference. Because if you do restoration and preservation for your body, what you're doing is expanding that model onto the environment so
It's
that
hard
it
to separate the
maintains
two.
it.
Right.
It's the idea being of it being a different guild is you shift your context. It's not that
Outwardly.
something is different or you're doing something is different. Your perspective of it is more encompassing, if you will, greater. Which is why the whole idea of bleeding into technology, data, and trade is built on top of that. It's just an expansion of the exact same immunity into a larger sphere of abstraction. So, like, you're treating your environment through that immunity lens. So that means the technology and the information that is stored within it starts to become more isomorphic. Oh, switch context from the technological perspective, that's the greater guild. Switch context to the data perspective, that's the greater guild. The reason that
You're kind of losing me right now, I'll be honest, but because I'm might be because I'm half distracted trying to. I want to pull up the glossary.
So there's a following of intensities about where immunity can be projected. So one abstraction is the environment as a whole. But the environment is really like the technology you put into it, right? So then that becomes subject to your immunity. Then the technology is doing something else, collecting data. That needs to come also into the fold of immunity. So you have to do hygiene. That data has to be hygienic. It has to be nutrition. It has to be
Yeah,
promoting of rest.
I know.
Promoting of
That's so weird.
Fitness.
This isn't like a traditional hierarchy.
No.
Of significance.
It's taking one concept and expanding it over and over and over, a bunch of abstractions.
And I'm not sharing the desktop, but no, I am. Coming, so we have here natural guilds from the bottom, education, immunity, environment, technology, data. So we're building up here, but you don't lose what you
never leave. You never leave the education.
What you gained
guild.
At any lower layer, they all are now in play for the next layer.
Right. Just a way to look at the next layer in those terms.
That's this way of building, and this is again kind of like derived from the idea of you have cellular organisms, singular, you have multicellular organisms connecting through some higher things. This is just an example of how complexity builds up, right, in layers.
Mm-hmm.
Same type of layering idea. You never forget that it's just cells.
And you never forget that this is just an education.
Right.
And you never forget that it's just a focus.
Good point.
And you never forget that it's just an immunity. And you never forget that it's just an environment. And on it goes. Like, it's self-similar in that sense. Mm-hmm. Like, what you're doing in the lower layers...
It's a different way of modeling, a different way of thinking. Like, before we even talk about Portal Mountain to anybody, it seems like there has to be discussion on what is holonic modeling. Like, it seems at the beginning, it's come up at the beginning many times. If you don't get over this, there's no point in continuing.
Look, yeah, for example...
It's going to seem like an arbitrary hierarchy.
If you don't understand the complex adaptive model's premise to begin with, none of this will probably line up for you.
And again, we don't know everything. This is our model as we're developing.
No, it's in progress. We're assuming a few things, for sure.
Lots of things assumed, lots borrowed. It's a work in progress, which we enjoy.
All the borrows are the assumptions. Right?
All the what?
Everything we borrowed, we're assuming.
I would assume that. Sounds like a good assumption. And with that, we shall be right back.
seems a codependent idea. What is borrowing?
Yep. Step 1. Differentiate past from present as such on separate concepts. Step 2. Feed past into a form of regret and feed future into a form of anxiety. Step 3.
Yep.
Formulate all narratives in terms of those anxieties and regrets as a form of punishment and reward. Step 4. Sell ego based upon reward and punishment market. Roughly speaking, that's the tether.
On what
Now-
you can expect to get as a return
Yeah.
from your effort.
Right. Being tethered makes you an agent of that system through the ego because you're already being sold. Agents behave as charlatans of the system to sell and trade in ego. That creates the sound bites that fit back into the formulation of both myth and agency narratives, shaping the ego to project exactly the same self-replicating system that only does ego stacking. All of that amounts to the stunted maturation that I was discussing.
Arrested development.
Yeah.
It's a title of a TV show.
And what does the arresting is the entire system through its agents.
So,
And in both the metaphorical sense
So I
and the actual sense.
I did not record that, but I did write it down
Yeah, I know. I saw it.
in bits. So
You're following them,
I
right?
hope that, yeah, made all sense until it's something I didn't keep.
Which one? Myth only?
Myth openly restricts or something only. I forget.
Oh, it's restricted.
You only lose your something.
Okay, let's run through again one point by
Should we just? Why don't we just go back? Go on. Let's go.
I don't care. I'll just do the pacing either way.
Yeah. All right. Wait. Okay. All right. Let's start pacing. So we're going through the tether.
Yeah.
The tether. This is the ultimate result of the axiological conspiracy. This is what we've been reduced to. The tether. We have some 4 points here and commentary on what people experience in their interaction with the market.
So, point 1. Model speaking wise, the future is a rearrangement of past experiences into a structure, right? It's the first step into dismantling that by the system if we were to like look at it as an opposing force or
Right.
whatever, is
Oppose
to
that
draw a
understanding.
distinction between past and future.
To say they're different.
Exactly. To feed that difference, the past is filled with what's called regret. The future is filled with what's called anxiety. Both are actually mirror images of each other. You're anxious about the things that you're going to, you're regretting.
But just not unaware of the similarity, the sameness, I guess.
So that's the second step of the breakdown. So first one is to separate the future and the past into two distinct categories. The second one is to fill them up with
So
distinct
it's like regret
aspects of that
regret and shame and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff for what's happened in the past and
and how to not have it happen in the future,
how
which
to
is the
not
anxiety
how to not be
portion of it.
regretful and shameful in the future.
So separating the two, filling the two out with different mythologies that are actually amount to the same thing, but that's beside the point. That, in and of itself, is the
So point two.
way the dream is painted, if you will, and that dream now becomes
So these are narratives created surrounding those
past and future.
Ideas,
Right.
or experiences into regret and anxiety. Regret for the past, anxiety for the potential future. So we're kind of layering, we're stacking up like the
So now we have
causal
this,
structure.
So now we have this dream idea, which isn't talking about what you get in sleep, but what your mental projection is of the world in its entirety at any given moment.
Mm-hmm. A bunch of bad things that always happen and you're ashamed of, and potentially bad things that could happen.
So
that's who you are.
That is the mythology that shapes that dream. The inaction of that mythology is what gives agency to individual actors from within the dream, all of which are actually ego, but you don't see that part of it. It's hidden behind the framework of transactions of them that they are themselves going through. So from you, ego is hidden. You see agency.
Sorry,
and together,
I gapped out. Sorry, I apologize.
Past, present, dream.
Yep. So
every actor is ego, but because in the dream they appear in different places. So the dream is the entire mythology. Not the entire mythology, the entire narrative. All of the narrative, that's dream. Now you have a mythology, which is like the cosmos of that dream. And then you have narrative, the individual agencies, the entities moving through the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is built through sound bites, through the narrative. Right. Everything is sound bites. But the ego narrative
I'm imagining
the
big chart right now.
The ego narrative here presents itself different than the ego narrative here, and that difference is called agency. Because these two individuals have sold their souls to the devil, if you will, and for different reasons.
So within the dream, they're quantified in certain different ways.
Yeah. Ego being like the lens through which everything is operating, agency being the actual operation itself. So
ego being a more fundamental structure that you see
the selling of oneself,
replicating and expressing in many different ways. Those are through agency.
As soon as the self is sold through the ego, the end result is a bunch of agencies. It's not a one-to-one. You got to think more many to many.
Because we're talking about jobs people do and stuff.
Being a parent, being a worker, being this, being that, being the other thing.
It has to be articulated.
So you had list a plethora of agencies.
For the system.
Agencies that also conflict with each other for some reason. Nobody would have ever thought about that.
Well, this is the underlying ego stacking is the idea of being one above another class, classifying this class is better than that.
So now you're getting to the whole spectrum of the picture of what I keep calling the ontological matrix. So that to capture this ongoing process of like ego-fed mythology and cosmos fed mythology. There's the cosmos, there's the agents of the cosmos, and then there's the ego assuming the agency of what the cosmos presents themselves as categories. Right? Together, the actual playing field in which we find ourselves in, where shit hits the fucking road, is the ontological matrix. When all of that is taken together from the abstract into the concrete realm and played out. That's what those words all signify. So the dream is like the abstraction, the movie, but the movie playing out on the screen itself, the image by image by image by image situation, is the matrix.
More contextual, feels like. And like when you're interacting, like you go to McDonald's, buy a cheeseburger. There's like a certain matrix there that you're touching, you're interacting with it, and you're giving. There's a give and take based on protocol, right? Boom. There it is, the matrix. They have to give you a cheeseburger because you paid money for it.
What's interesting there is that you haven't actually described a unique situation. You've described a situation
like every
that happens
situation.
all the fucking time.
Everywhere, yeah.
There's no personality in it. There's nothing in it. There's just different agents that came together and fell apart. The same agents came together, fell apart. The same agents came together, fell apart. The individuals might have been obviously different, but the agency, the theatrical played roles were exactly the same over and over and over and over.
Right.
So this is where we're separating ego, agency, and individuality as a whole.
We haven't really, it feels like, separated this agency idea of cluster of agencies and all that with individuality as a term. Individuality, is that the term? Like,
because individuality...
Because agencies need to be fulfilled. Right?
Individuality is what agency is presenting itself as, which is a mirage. It's a transactional agent within the system. So individuality is a narrative of the self that is being sold through the market. Right. What makes me an individual?
Yeah.
Which aspect of me am I delineating?
This is
from
back
the
to
market?
ego. It's more fundamental.
It's the same picture, though, for everybody involved. You'll ask yourself the same question. It's the same ego. The agency will be different. You'll have this answer versus that answer to your dilemma. Whatever. Still playing the system's game, though. What is retained is the ego stacking. So, now we fatten out our perspective of this tether.
This again, ego stacking, this idea of classifying one group or groups, or stratifying them above the other. The criminals are at the bottom every time. That's what's happening. So, doesn't matter how you arrange the deck chairs. That's what you're doing. There are going to be people underneath that getting run over by it.
So the only thing to picture, to simplify the image even further, to like really reduce it to a very simple idea, you need to understand the ego as a self-reflective mirror. There's no difference between ego at the bottom, ego at the top. That's not the thing. You don't differentiate ego
at an
based
even
on
lower
stack.
layer. But remember, we brought up the idea of different ego.
So hold on. Let me finish the description.
Sure.
Sideline, you have a ledger going into each individual ego layer. That ledger is the reward and punishment ledger. So there isn't a difference between what an ego is at any different layer. There's only a difference in which set of rewards and punishments the layer provides for said ego. Together, taken together, whoever it is.
So class is a term then, aside from ego, is what you're saying.
Yeah, like you would class. What class would be is a difference in layers between ego.
Right.
But
just to clarify, I'm not the programmer here,
so you don't get something that's different from ego at any different layer, but you do get a different agency provided from that layer, and the agency distinction happens through what rewards and what punishments, the system feeds back into it.
Sure. Yeah. If it's a lower agency, you're going to get a whole bunch of punishments and probably nothing for a reward, other than to not be punished, maybe if you're lucky.
The bottom tier, the criminal,
Right.
the invalid,
Yeah.
the child,
Right.
and so forth.
Okay. So class is a thing though. So we have ego and class.
Yeah.
We never incorporated that, but I think
Because
it's
class would
important.
stratify the ego layers, but it wouldn't change what egos are.
It's not right. Ego is more fundamental to that.
Yeah. The discussion about class comes up when we have owner, worker, and I forget what else we have. We do have a holonic model for this. We have the owner and the worker, at the very least, to capture some of this.
I don't remember holonic having like
It's
owner
in the
class in it.
it's in the glossary.
Or you didn't say isomorphic. You said holonic.
Go into the glossary and
I'm there.
what was search owner.
Give a term owner.
Yeah, just search owner. You'll land on a
Agency, corporation, worker, manager, owner. It's under agency.
That's like the overlaying main hierarchy that you should abstractly see overlaying the ego stack.
Of what our world is
Yeah,
doing.
so when you're thinking about what the rewards and punishments are,
these are the
this is
different
a
classes. So
this
these
is
are
the
classes.
yeah, this is the template.
Yeah.
So you might actually have more physical layers, but they can be aggregated to an extent.
And it's interesting how even
and in between them they can be aggregated. So you can take an ego stack, look at the top, and see the owner worker divide, and then you can look at a lower layer and see the same divide, and then you can take the whole thing and then see the same divide over and over and over. So it's not meant to like.
It's interesting how anybody could say they are the owner of their self, and this is like the
Yeah, but
the ego thing.
do you control the amount of hot lead being pumped into your body at any given moment?
Right. But I'm just saying, like, even at there's nobody escapes being an owner
Or not an owner
in the system. They're not somebody else who's the owner. They're those guys.
That's my whole point. It's like you can claim you're an owner of your body all you want, right?
This was another big point because
how much control do you have when that body of yours is getting fed a whole bunch of hot lead?
Too much.
Not any. So there's a distinction to be made there. It's an extreme one, but from extremes we get our little spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just an interesting point that I guess dysmorphic or not, we're still going to benefit from holonic modeling.
Well,
even to describe what's going on here with agency.
Not only do we benefit from holonic modeling, is that any kind of rejection of it winds up in our own self-destruction. So when we don't treat the environment holonically the way we should, the environment ends up towards becoming poisonous and all of those things that don't support our living in it. So we don't really have that choice to begin with. Which is I think is a primary delusion that drives the entire dysmorphic situation. Because if you think about the delay, that's what it's talking about. Like it's the delay of the environment coming back and killing you for becoming too poisonous for your survival.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's interesting that even dysmorphic structures like ego stacking and all that can still be broken down holonically as to what's actually happening, because we're in a system of holons.
Well, if you notice what it looks like, it's just a bad approximation of the complex adaptive system.
Right.
The holonic stacking and the ego stacking are both forms of stacking. It's just what being stacked in the ego framework is the self-same mechanism. So there's no difference between the layers. It's just ego here, ego there, ego there, ego there, ego there. It's like a cancer. It doesn't work with its layers. It's just working through ego. Just something to be traded for the next narrative, and the next one, and the next. There's no meaning. There's no.
Yeah.
There's no guiding
This
principle.
reminds me again of
Or theme. There's nothing there.
the original
So arbitrary.
natural guild discussion stack of like immunity, education, immunity. You build things up, and they progress throughout the build up.
Keeping the theme. Whereas
Right.
this stack keeps
There's
no theme.
There's some kind of theme going on, right?
Yeah, this stack has no theme. It's just ego, 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 ego. That theme does not replicate very well with complexity.
No, it breaks immediately. It's the opposite of
So it's
replicating
basically
well.
trying to shove a round peg into a square hole, or the other way around, which is actually less likely to happen.
Yeah,
So
I think you're right. I think you're right
The
about that.
stacking of the ego is the correct instinct. The ego stacking, the thing that being gets stacked, is the runaway element. This is where we can start honing in on something like the problem of counting. Because if you look at what the ego stack is doing, it's accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why everything looks the same is because everything is being processed by the same accounting system. There's just number churning. There's no... The whole idea behind words and number, one has meaning, the other does not. This becomes just a numbers game with no meaning. There's no
I get
myth.
that, but the meaning was already lost by not stacking like immunity and all that kind of stuff.
The meaning gets lost in the phase that you had issues with accepting. The laundering of meaning happens in the one phase that predates the first plateau. Because to get the first plateau, you have to have laundered meaning to begin with. You have to work with laundered meaning.
I think we were just arguing about
the feast economy is the
the
precursor to the market economy.
surplus.
For that same reason.
I thought it was
and
surplus of reward.
Surplus and neglect. Neglect of punishment, surplus of reward from nature specifically.
That's what I'm saying. I just felt it was simpler than like a feast where it's like a special feast. Well, it's just surplus. You can reward the shit out of people and do whatever the fuck you want.
Yes, yes. It's when that reward and punishment gets...
And the punishment is right in there with it. You have an army to protect your ability.
Well, not a reward as a punishment.
Army to protect the surplus. And to screw anybody over who messes with it.
How do you know you have a surplus?
It's increasing. You count it.
Counting.
You count it. It's
so
increasing.
without the counting.
Right.
Without the counting, there's no surplus, there's no mention of surplus, there's no thinking of surplus.
Right. It is different. And there are tribes
that
don't count, basically don't count at all. They don't have numbers beyond 4 or something.
Think about the energy it takes to count versus this reward in that tribal setting.
Like, if you just use your intuition to grab enough for everybody and then go and give it to them, why did you have to count it? If there's too much, you just bring it back to the storehouse. Who cares? Right?
Exactly. Maybe Joe was sick and he couldn't grab enough for himself to do.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
That surplus isn't going to last.
For most things, you don't need to, but here we are counting every last damn thing.
But for the wrong reasons. Like, there's nothing wrong with counting. Like, it's not a fucking terrible sin to count.
Amazing. Does wonderful things.
But using counting for, like, every problem.
Right.
It becomes mechanical.
Let's see. Shall I hire you? Your credit score is sorry.
My credit score is like this because nobody's hiring.
Too
me.
bad. Too bad. Right, yeah, yeah. And then you get in the feedback cycles, positive feedback.
Like, are you trying to make me commit crimes so that I can fend for myself?
Yeah,
Like, is this the way it's going?
because I'm willing to just do a job. Fuck
Right.
off. Yeah,
Like,
it's wild. And then a lot like the nepotism or whatever.
What's
That's
wild
one thing.
is
Like
not. It's
people
not,
you know, just
so-
hire your family only or this kind of stuff. Tribal
What's
thinking.
wild is not this. What's wild is that everybody fucking knows this already, and it's like, what are you gonna do, man?
That's a promising idea.
What are you
If
gonna
they
do?
do actually, maybe
It's just
do.
the way things work.
That's the way it is. But they know that there's something they acknowledge or whatever, try to give comfort. Oh, that's the way it is. That's giving comfort. They acknowledge it, that it is a thing.
It's the way it is because that's the way you want it. Because you don't know different. And
Right.
That's
Ultimately,
like a holier than thou position, but still.
ultimately, just this getting stuck. And yep, especially in these ideological battles, it's like one way or the other.
So we haven't even touched the part of the dream that becomes psychosis, neurosis in this fattening up of the tether. We started off with fattening up with past and present, past and future, sorry.
Sure.
Then moving into like how they're not different, but the difference is being utilized to increase regret and anxiety.
Motivation, in other words.
And regret and anxiety formulating the entirety of what is happening and what should happen through the narrative, which leads to the climbing of, the way I described it is scrambling up the ego stack, like the rat race.
Mm-hmm. It's like the world that is accepted by people.
Yeah, so the regret and the anxiety are the primary drivers of the reactionary belief system, if you will, about the psychosis and the activity that is the neurosis of scrambling up the stack, and that there's only one thing to do, and that's scramble up the stack.
So I don't think we got clear. From regret and anxiety comes punishment or reward and punishment.
Yes, reward and punishment aimed
so-
at scrambling up the ego stack.
Right, because this becomes the world that we understand, our reality.
That becoming of the world and reality is the psychosis. That's the word I'm giving that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the need to scramble up the stack, this
Because
drive,
that's what you've learned to do.
That instinct, yes, is
You've
the
learned to
neurosis.
do it based on this reality.
And
That's the neurosis side of it. That we have two sides to.
So no matter what happens, no matter what the actual details of the narrative is, there are two things that are consistent with that. It's three. One is the reality of the ego stack. Two is that the reality of the ego stack is the reality. And three, scrambling up the stack is the only activity possible. That frames the inner workings of the state of the ontological matrix as it is now, not the holonic version of it.
So this is a social competition for who's the best capitalist.
Yeah.
And that's what we're agreeing to all do. No, I'm the best capitalist. No, I am. No, I am. But it's a cooperation. We're actually working together to do this, to stratify in our bank account information. Who has the biggest bank account? That's basically what we're doing right now. It's like an Olympic tournament where we're cooperating to see who can make the biggest fucking bank account. And this is the whole purpose of Earth.
And then
floating through space right now.
And then check this out. You have all of these agencies acting out all of this mythology out. What are they doing? They're dishing out punishments. They're dishing out rewards.
Right.
They're dishing out the mythology that what is a reward, what is a punishment. So the whole thing feeds into itself. It's self-reinforcing in that sense. It's like it attaches itself to the abstractions. The abstractions seem to
It's an active
work
system.
for it.
It's an active system. If it's in your beliefs, you do the thing and you end up pushing yourself up.
But also becoming the agency of that very same system that does exactly that. Pushes and pulls people up and down through the ego stack.
Right.
The neurosis is that that's all you can do. The psychosis is that that's all there is. And the dream is self-fulfilling.
Right.
But this particular dream arrests what? Development. Because it's a perversion, if you will, of the ego, of the complex adaptive stack into a formula that actually isn't very adaptive whatsoever.
Right. And is systemic, machine-like, cold, arbitrary,
Cancerous.
unfeeling, cancerous. Yep.
It doesn't play by the rules of the same model that it emerged from. It rearranged the rules into a self-feeding and self-defeating feedback system.
Right, but it's understandable.
Oh yeah, like because
we can model it.
It's understandable from the perspective of like if you have a medium and you have a whole bunch of signals out on that medium, you'll have arrangements that work well with each other and arrangements that become self typhoons.
You'll see both. And if people
you see that with viruses on the cellular level, you see that with bacteria, you see that with every layer that comes up.
If the cells,
so you got viruses, you got bacteria that can get you infections, but you also have parasites that can give you infections. Right? Like, it goes all across every stratum of the fucking thing that your body can be invaded by.
That's probably all cool. I was going to say something like if the cells are unable to self-articulate or understand who they are, this was the feeling I got anyways, that, again, from the subconscious, we are unendingly, unceasingly subject to these impulses of what the unconscious gives us, unless we have a model of ourself. Period.
Mm-hmm.
You will always be subject to the impulse, unaware, unconscious, unless you have a decent self-model.
And this is exactly what arrested development means. You're not
to prevent the model.
Do not have that model.
Prevent that model from even occurring.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the arrest.
Being arrested. You're under arrest. Freeze!
Which is exactly what happens if you acquire said model.
So we were looking for a term. We thought about the R word and were properly corrected. It seems like a hurtful thing. Arrest is a beautiful term. I'm pretty happy about that.
And yes, stunted development is a factor. But I think
stunting seems fine. I think.
But I think the external factor of somebody arresting and stopping the development is much more
stunting
potent.
feels almost being stunted.
In this case, I've really.
But if you're arrested, it's not your fault. That is the clear.
No, that's yeah. Don't be a Nazi now. What? If you're arrested, it's not your fault. Fuck off.
Wait, I'm lost again. I'm lost. I didn't see that coming at all.
If you're arrested, it means that an external force is stopping you. That's all you're trying to say. You're not talking about arrested for a fault, like where, the immune system must actually intervene.
Right? Like you're hurting people?
Yeah.
And you need to be stopped?
I'm just making sure that you're not heard.
Okay.
To be saying that.
Did I? I still haven't worked. I haven't worked hard enough on my dog whistles yet. I'm still a bit confused, but
the fact of arrest as a
It's an
process.
external force.
It's a process of an external force stopping an internal force. That's what we're getting at.
Yeah.
We're
Not
getting
that
at-
your fault because of your race or something. Is that where
No,
we're going?
like getting arrested for no fault of yours, just because cops are bad. That's not
Right.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. No.
Like we're not
Wow, I
making a
haven't even-
comment about the police.
Dude,
force.
like they're so fucking
go.
blindsiding. Okay, I'll meditate on that right now.
Yeah, like being arrested and being capital
It doesn't mean
arrested.
you're guilty. Arrested and guilty are two different things.
Mm.
And the arrested in our term we're talking about is
It's the stopping. It's the immediate stopping.
by the system.
Which links back to the previous term we tried to use.
Not stopping of committing a crime. Stopping of developing into a whole holistic human being or whatever you say, like maturing.
Mhm.
Arrested from maturing. Right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Mhm.
And literally the only reason I'm gravitating towards the word arrest is the extrinsic force that is involved in that stopping.
Right.
Not the internal, inability to understand a subject or something to that effect.
Right. I feel like it's a very it's a well done term already. It feels like because it's extending any grievances surrounding the term, it's just extending them. The system has arrested you long before you were physically arrested, right? We could say, if that's what the grievance is about.
The arrest of the system is the perpetual cause for you to be potentially physically arrested by the system.
That's what
It
I said.
injects the causal factor. It becomes its own hyperstition.
Extending. Mm-hmm.
So, the tether is fat. The fatness comes from the past and the future being like two different
I don't know if you were saying
elements that if you imagine the tether like this, and you imagine past like a thickening, and a future is a thickening of that rope.
they're becoming different.
Yes, but if you move 3D wise, you see the whole thing is a circle. Past, future, past, future, past, future, past, future.
Like
so it's that kind of a 3D, yeah. A braid, a coil, whatever. And so that thickening is like the strength, if you will, of its hold.
So again,
the more past and future are separated.
I wish there was a better word. Holonic model. Due to that, we can say that this braid, we can talk about the tether. It may have higher layers of complexity, but at the most basic level, we can take past and present and separate it. And this is the root cause of tension in the rest of the stack. You will see it all present all the way through up. The separation of
the past from the future. So the denial, basically the denial that the future is reformulated past. So if you try to take them as separate concepts,
it built in the moment,
and forget about their linking, the way they link together,
how they're formulated.
Yeah. So if you take the formulation of the future, you can take every part of the past experience and regret and feed an anxiety into the future layers, especially if you keep them as separate entities. Without acknowledging that this is built from that.
The idea is to forget that these futuristic anxieties, which feel real, are just a formulation of what was the past.
Right.
But the past doesn't necessarily, like, we can choose, or anything can happen to make new and different things which we never expected. There is actually, like, difference between what we think in our past model mentally and what is actually possible in the future, which we can
So-
never comprehend.
So what happens if you try to lock the past into a single narrative is that you're trying to lock the future
That's
into
it, mental machinery.
into its acceleration.
The future becomes a tiny block of
acceleration
things based on what happened in the past.
That's accelerationism in a nutshell, isn't it? Is that not? You, not the, not the, not
We
the,
have multiple
not the,
definitions going, I think.
not the academic discipline to point out what accelerationism is, but more like taking the past as a separate being from the future and reformulating the future in terms of that past anyway, sets up a situation where it can only go a certain direction. Repetition of the past in particular.
I'm reminded of hyperstition, which seems like you would try to be pointing to,
Hyperstition
like,
is the thing
building something to do that intentionally, but this as acceleration.
Acceleration would be a hyperstition that is lockstep into a cycle, like a typhoon, so to speak. It does present a form of accelerationism, but it's like a storm. It just cycles in on itself, feedbacks into itself. It has its wave of destruction only, and that's all it causes.
This is the point for most people when they say accelerationism, to simply push things past the absurd until it destructs. I don't think that's the real accelerationism. True accelerationism, as I've described it, would be taking up this model.
I'm not looking for a true accelerationism. I'm looking for one point of it, and in this case, is you can take this systemic model that separates the past from the future.
Okay, what do you do with it?
Recombine it and see what it actually amounts to. So what I'm saying is that basically the accelerationism is that if you look at the situation of past and future separated, it will build up to this, to this, to this, to this, to this, the tether. And that's the acceleration.
You can see a future happening.
Yeah, and that's the acceleration. The deceleration of that, if you wanted to, is to remove the barrier that says past is not future. You remove that artificial barrier, and the fact of that acceleration becomes like mythology in and of itself. Like, oh, if you do separate them, that's what happens. So you can now remove the actual happening of the acceleration.
I feel like
we're
fundamentally in agreement, I think, because to me, accelerationism is a return back to that connection point where we reconcile things, and it's a fact of the model being a companion to the subconscious. Automation.
So with that model, you see the actual acceleration.
This model was available.
With model, you just see it as an abstract concept instead.
I believe the model was available before civilization.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I believe it was there.
Delay and surplus. You don't need
got out of control.
You don't need model for delay
but something is waiting in the wings, or waiting for its proper time.
Well, yeah, because
and that is the model.
If you collapse the complex adaptive system bad enough, it's going to start reasserting itself. Right? If you pull back all of its veils of its protection,
why would you accelerate the decay and destruction of a society unless there was a model available for it to transition? Why would you? That's false acceleration. When the model is available, It's simply something coming from the root that's been missing the whole time and now it's here.
False acceleration. That's a better capture of what the stack is doing, the ego stack is doing.
Sure, yes.
Because it's mimicking the complex adaptive stack itself, hence stack, right? But the perversion of the stacking mechanism itself is the acceleration leads it into a false direction from the rest of the complex adaptive stacking.
Right. And people think that that's real accelerationism to support that until it breaks. And that's all it is. This is the false accelerationism.
Right. The acceleration,
just to support it till it breaks.
The accelerationism.
Hurrah! We're doomed. Yay!
I think the accelerationism that we are promoting then, therefore, is like there are false and true. The false being where you separate the past from the future and build up the anxiety and whatever and accelerate that. You take that the false. It's not false from like it's not happening. It's false in the sense of where it leads. Right? So that can be accelerated.
Without the fork in the road, it leads.
And then with the fork in the road, there's a different picture if you accelerate that, which is the
right.
goal.
Mm-hmm.
So acceleration is
true accelerationism. This is. I'm glad we connected on that because this is my definition: true accelerationism versus false.
So accelerationism here simply takes the.
It's inevitable in its way because it's the model expressing itself.
Right. So both cases are a case of accelerationism. Truths and the falsehoods are really basically are how isomorphic it is to the complex adaptive stack versus the ego stack.
Right. And which one you push?
Well, they're self-feeding. With the complex adaptive stack being on the more vulnerable side because it will accept temporary ego stacks as a matter of course.
Right. Be right back.
The ego stack, which is the false acceleration. But the pumpkin diagram, this is where it all flattens out. And that would be like what we are calling here the true accelerationism. So
pumpkin heads.
I don't know if you remember this, but the biggest point about that diagram is that nature is the entropy and the reward factor, and dishes out punishments and rewards basically based on activity.
Right? Yeah, natural rewards and punishment,
Right, like
if you will.
sustaining focus or not sustaining focus.
You climb the tree and you get the coconut. Sweet.
To that effect, something to that effect, yeah. The the main takeaway from the pumpkin diagram, if you remember it, is that it's a form of perpetual bootstrap that acknowledges
Sure.
that it's in a perpetual bootstrap. So modeling itself. It doesn't stack. That's the takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
So you still have potential at the top, you still have entropy at the bottom to fall down to, right? But the between layer is even there. So the point is that with the false acceleration, you jump from bootstrap to bootstrap to bootstrap to bootstrap to bootstrap to bootstrap to bootstrap. It's a never-ending bootstrap.
Sure. Whatever's cool.
Whereas with
At the
this,
time.
you stay within the same self bootstrapping mechanism. The very basic of the emergence mechanism. As close as possible to the metal, as close as possible to the complex adaptive system as it is.
Right. This diagram collapses the idea of a stack of one above the other egos.
Yeah.
Which we have in this chart.
Right, which with the system dishing out reward and punishment being a ledger that is associated with each layer. Here, layers no longer actually play a role.
Right.
Nature itself is your potential. Nature itself is your punisher.
So entropy is here positioned as the dealer.
The arbitrator of punishment.
Right. Entropy. What a bitch.
So sure, you don't get away from it. Your body will still decay, you'll still get sick, you'll still get hurt, you'll still die, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it's not going to be because...
It's not built into this.
It's not because somebody punished you. It's because it's going to be like,
Right.
You didn't survive.
It's not a consequence of the fun land.
No.
The fun, not the fun house, the fun land.
of the social structure itself.
Yeah.
So,
More arbitrary, anyways.
natural causes and conditions. There's no motive to lob hot lead at anybody in this situation because the access to everything is the same.
Right. It seems simplistic, but it's simply modeling what do we do when we throw hot lead at each other through the barrel of a machine meant for killing. Mm-hmm. It's a stacking, one above the other. How can you kill somebody if you think that you're below them?
To gain their position.
To gain the position, to be one up. Right,
Take their
no,
place. Take their place.
That's not a right question. That's true.
Replace their agency
Obviously.
with your ego.
It's not below, yeah. Below, above, same.
It's just playing the
It's
same game.
Exact same.
So the removal of the above and below logistic in and
How
of
can
itself.
you
So
kill somebody, yeah, if you
do you
don't believe in that, or if that's not part of your
affect. This is where affect plays the key role. What is it that stacks something above and below? the evaluation self is better, self is the same, self is worse. Above, below, and equal, right?
Mhm.
That's where it plays out. The ego stacking. That's what dispenses
Right,
those
okay, yeah.
placements.
Mhm.
Conceit.
Yeah,
Without the conceit, there's no placement in stacking.
it's
Without
good
this
to get
placement in
job
stacking,
there.
there's a flat holonic situation. That's the idea, anyway.
Mhm. As an archetype of how we relate to another.
Mm-hmm. It needs the conceit calculation to even have an arrangement of stacking of egos. So you have to feed that through your narratives, that reward and punishment and all of that are the arbitrators of pain and pleasure and all of that. The self-reinforcement, if you will.
It's interesting how context for certain scenarios gets in the way. I wouldn't want to hurt certain people, but if I'm being attacked, right?
Remove their ability to attack you.
The ability has to be removed. So however that happens, it's not perfect.
I always enjoy the linking it back to Shaolin and Buddhism. Part of being a Shaolin monk, if you will, is to adopt the whole Buddhist strategy of non-harm and all of that. How do you reconcile the two? Where the martial art is the meditation, where the ability to, fold clothes with people still in them,
yes,
is part of the natural arrangement of.
It's called medicine.
Right. It's the idea. The same idea applies if you start to break life apart into its own different components. Cells. If you break it into cells, well, you have bacterial cells and you have non-bacterial cells. The bacterial cells will infect your non-bacterial cells and cause a lot of damage. What do you do with them?
They must be folded.
So if you're willing to take a pill for a headache,
yeah, not.
This isn't a real question.
No, really, it's the power of, in a way, of an individual to defend himself is not a question. That we have to watch out for things happening.
How do you get the preservation and restoration aspect for the guild without that to begin with? How do you reconcile an environment that is violently damaged by other actors with that concept?
What it feels like, I'm just getting reminded of things, but the world is a hostile place in many cases, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And if we don't, then we don't exist. What is it to not exist? You're gone. So therefore, when we're talking higher layers, immunity is assumed.
Yeah.
Because none of this would exist without it. So
when discussing even the most rudimentary aspects of focus, without the discussion of preservation and restoration, you don't have a full-blown immunity guild. We don't even have the first guild that goes past education.
Well, and this is a personal thing too. This is a personal skill thing too.
Yeah.
Right? When you say we don't have.
Yeah, no, I'm fully admitting to the fact that we're incapacitated.
We're arrested.
We don't have the ability to preserve or restore. We might have some capacity to preserve, but to restore? Oh, no. This is where we need the others, if you will. Which are not participating very well.
Yeah. That's not our. That's not our field.
They're basically guests, and most of them are adversaries. Not from the
Who,
Not
doctors? Who is guest and adversary? I thought you were talking about
Sauce.
restoration.
Sauce.
I thought you were talking about general restoration, the ability to restore, and we have to export, if you will, certain skills, like within our model. Each of us, we only know how to do so much, so everything else is exported to society, as it is. All we can do is, if we have a problem with that, transition it. But it is what it is, and nobody's arguing that we shouldn't go to the hospital if there's something broken.
Makes sense why Buddha would say something to the effect of the Dharma is the only gift that you can really give. It ain't gonna be food, it ain't gonna be like any of these stopgap measures, it's not gonna be any of that.
Interesting.
The actual gift that can and has any perpetual effect whatsoever is this information. Because that information is what prevents from all of these fucking things from happening to begin with. It's not even a complicated concept, it's not profound, it's not anything. It's simply the observation that if we just don't do these things, we won't have to suffer the way we do. And the biggest gift you can give is to spread the information that if we don't do these things, it will not fucking hurt us.
The gospel.
So go ahead and sell that.
Have you heard the good news?
Right.
We don't have to suffer. We don't have to do
But
this.
what about the assholes? Will they be able to be assholes if you do this? Do you think about that part?
Well, I don't know if we want to wrap up or whatever, but we're pretty much past our normal, it's past 5, so why don't we just call it night and chill for a bit, wait for our ride, and peace on out of here. Lads and gents and others, it's been a pleasure.
Anxiety, regrets, rewards and punishments.
Yep, this is what the result of the axiological conspiracy to obfuscate the meaning of value and to allow people to make automated value judgments throughout their world makes people into automatons. This creates into the whole system of society. At each layer we have all these automatons doing things.
It's more insidious than that. It's painting every moment as pain and pleasure. It's feeding into the conceited cycle of I am better, I am same, I am worse. It legitimizes those kinds of thought patterns, all of which reflect back into the narrative, all of which reflect back into what is punishment, what is reward, what's right, what's wrong, where's the past, where's the future, what to regret, what to be anxious about. Again, it goes
one big hook.
Again, it goes through like as a reward and a punishment mechanism. Again, it inflicts pain, pleasure, or neutrality. Again, that inflicts a sentiment towards better, worse, or similar. And again, it feeds back into a narrative of success, failure. And again, it feeds back into past and future. And again, it feeds back into anxiety and regret.
Cycle.
Again.
People are living like this right now in ideology.
We are living like this right now. You, me, are living like this right now. I'm not reflecting about other people. I'm reflecting about what I experience.
The human condition. It always becomes a fine line. A fine line of, well, what's the difference? It's like this little thread of something that's different somehow.
And again, that feeds into a narrative. And again, that feeds into a conceit. And again, that feeds into pleasure and pain. Again, for punishment and pleasure and reward. Sorry. And again, it feeds into like a sense of self.
No, we're not separate from this. We have our jobs. We do our things. The only thing you're left
to do is, where do I position this fucking ego self into this narrative so that I can sell sell and buy the correct things from that market so that this ego
Can go
is
up
is
higher.
not lower, is maybe the same or maybe higher in my conceit circuitry.
Right. And that's the construction of our world as it is built.
And all of that happens before the program activates into the running form of itself.
And
That's the buildup of the program's constituents.
Right. This is the subconscious automation and all that.
The artifacts being given as is.
And so
Take it and go.
we're saying add more artifacts that
Negate that.
what the thing that's being presented to you and all the emotions and how you feel to impulsively do a thing, there's a structure that causally, if you believe in science and this kind of stuff,
Or your own experiences.
that causally find it out for yourself, causally makes this whole structure of consciousness happen to the point where you're presented with this impulse and you don't have a choice because you don't have the model aside from what the impulse was built out of. The model of yourself, the thing that made the impulse. If you don't see that, you can't escape from it.
And if you do see that, that does not guarantee an escape.
No, it's only a beginning because the subconscious terrain is a jungle and you can only try to affect things in little pieces at a time, especially by adding the model.
It's a good way to say that.
Sure.
Just become aware of
this. We're not separate from this being high and mighty.
Identify this as a point of conceit. Identify that as a point of conceit. Identify this as a point of conceit. What am I talking about? A point of judgment where you're better, same, or worse. A point of judgment where you're better, same, or worse.
Right. To look at that
story,
to look at the homeless camp or the tents or whatever and be like, I wish they were on fire
the
right
fact
now.
of you having a story of where you are better than them should give you pause.
Right. And
for
this
analysis.
is the fork. So the model to see that this is what's happening.
Spots.
Right. And then we can better relate to our fellow humans. If we can intercept these thoughts, they're gonna still happen. They're gonna still happen, especially for some people who are embedded, entrenched. It's gonna be hard as fuck to get out of that. And it's a process. But it starts with, I think, self-model. Adding a self-model to your view of the world. There's also you are making this view. If you don't accept that as part of your view of the world, that you are making the view of the world, what the fuck is going on?
I have a real world
You're
example
detached.
for all of this.
You're detached from what's actually going on.
I have a real world example for all of this kind of talk that doesn't involve just being abstract about it.
Sure, that was too abstract.
I absolutely fucking loathe Islam as a concept.
Uh-oh.
I loathe Islam as a concept. I believe it is one of the most harmful ideologies to have ever existed on this fucking planet in modern times.
You brought something up about prescriptive and descriptive presentations before.
So,
in that the Bible will be descriptive about
violence.
Oh, this happened in the past. Oh, this happened in the past. But the
certain
Quran will be prescriptive.
As
You
in-
must do this.
Yes.
Now you must do this. Now you must do this.
This is how you
completely
treat,
different books. I've
this
never
is how
heard
you-
that from any
This is how you
source
treat people.
before.
But this is actually the very definitive markers of the differences between the two books.
Methods of communication, of reality navigation.
You will find in the Bible, you will find like things like they went into a city, they destroyed everybody, they slaughtered all the men, women, and children.
This is what happened.
They slaughtered all the animals. They did.
Right.
The Quran reads like this: You shall, you shall, you shall, you will, you do, you will. That's one point.
Removes a lot of interpretation and to what should I do right now. It becomes that automated. It's isomorphic with the automated the jungle, the affect jungle, what tells you something, you must do this. It's already the book is just giving you that.
Islam maintained the market
Interesting.
machine throughout the Middle Ages for that reason.
It precludes. It assumes you don't have a model. That's what gets.
Or
me
if
on
you have a
this.
model, it's got to be obliterated.
I think you hear what I'm saying, though.
Mhm.
That's what it seems like. It
You've
assumes.
experienced yourself.
It
You have
assumes. It
experience
assumes
with
you have
Islam.
no self model and therefore must be told literally what to do.
Or any self model that you might have is against the rule of Allah, and therefore you
Sure.
might need to be
Right.
exterminated.
It's not like this. You must do that. You're not doing that. Goodbye.
I'm sure you've met Islam on that surface level before. I mean, I have my biases, but they're not as clear
My
cut as one might imagine.
my opinion there is, yeah, it does seem much more like regimented and like the pray every day and all this kind of stuff, like militaristic
But
in its presentation. I don't know about I haven't read the Quran or anything.
you
So
have experiences though where you travel with your dad though too, right?
Sure.
You weren't subjected to any of that, were you?
The religious police would chase my sister around and like trying to whack her in the legs.
So
And
you
that's what my dad never. We're just going to the mall. They would
So they
come
actually
up.
did that.
They'd come up and start hitting her. Yeah, and dad would fucking
you're-
lose his mind on them.
So you know intrinsically that what Islam is doing is self-harm. It's not actually doing anything beneficial.
I didn't feel good about that one fucking bit. I'll tell you that.
Because what did it do? Like,
Just like get out, stop. Here's my.
get away from them.
Yeah.
Don't stop what. It's not about stop what you're doing. It's get the fuck away from them.
Get out. Yeah.
So what is Islam doing to itself? It's causing a situation of get the fuck away from it.
And on that beautiful note, maybe we should bring this up again in the future. Discussion. It's like a religious.
The point being is that Islam is the most hurtful to Muslims. That's the point. I'm not where I'm going.
There's a lot of weird things like
all of this.
Iran used to be progressive and all that. Now they're all scarved up and like, what's that? Be scarved?
Afghanistan used to be progressive. Did you fucking realize that it was a hippie trail?
That's wild. No,
Yeah.
No, I didn't. No, but
in
however,
the 70s, Afghanistan was like a hot spot for hippies.
However, that's wild. We're peacing out. This is it for today. I feel like we progressed the narrative of the axiological conspiracy into a lot of like really dynamics of politics of identity that we can all feel today. This is all rooted in something that happened a long time ago. And with that,